Ling Han sent a mental command, and this drop of indestructible true fluid instantly dispersed. Like dew, it moistened every single part of his body. His damaged internal organs, as well as his fractured bones, were healing at a terrifying pace. One has to understand, even with Ling Han's talent, he had still spent 10,000 years' time to comprehend the first level of cultivation techniques of the indestructible heaven scroll. How could this single drop of indestructible true fluid that he had managed to congeal not be awesome? It could practically revive a dead person and allow new flesh to be grown on bones. It definitely could be claimed as the ultimate treasured medicine. Someone finally discovered that Ling Han had managed to sit upright, and a shocked expression flashed over his face. They were all very clear that none of them had made a killing move in the barrage of blows just now, but so many of them had all struck at the same time. Even if none of them made an attempt to kill, it should have been more than enough to cause serious injury to Ling Han. There was nothing to be done about it. Who asked this brat not to know what's good for him? In a way, this also allowed him to learn a valuable lesson. Yet the brat actually managed to so quickly get up. This was a big enough shock that their eyes were about to pop out from the astonishment. How could this be? Could it be that this brat was wearing some kind of treasured armor that could disperse part of the power behind any attacks that hit him? That should be the case. How could there be any other possibility? Brat, hand over the treasured saber. That is not something that you should wield, a middle-aged man shouted. Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open. The indestructible true fluid had completely exercised its effects, allowing him to mostly heal his injuries. He did not answer the speaker, but rather inserted his divine sense into the treasured saber in his hands to activate the spiritual tool concealed within the saber. He was no idiot. He could heal his injuries once with the help of the indestructible true fluid, but there was no way he could heal them a second time. Since he dared to grab food from the tiger's mouth, he would have to resuscitate this treasured saber. That way, what could a few gushing spring-tier martial artists do against him? He was Zhang Yufeng's master, and the former's martial arts were all taught by him. They were both of the same line of martial arts, so there was a high possibility that he could use the treasured tool left behind by Zhang Yufeng. This was a risk, but he could not consider too much about it anymore. "How dare you ignore me, little junior?" The middle-aged man who had spoken previously instantly grew furious. All of the people here were the heirs of the imperial family or the 8 great clans, so all of them had extremely high pride. How could they tolerate a junior putting on airs in front of them? He immediately acted. His origin power was given form, becoming a colossal palm which headed towards Ling Han in a grabbing motion. "Li Yuan, you wish." Immediately, someone else made a move to stop him. He was of course not trying to help Ling Han, but it was rather that he feared this Li Yuan would take advantage of this opportunity to grab the treasured saber. Bastard! Li Yuan indeed had that kind of idea, and was enraged by this man's move to stop him. He could not help but immediately come to blows with the person who had attempted to stop him. "Brat, hand over the treasured saber." Another person rushed over with the intention to grab the saber. "It's mine. Mine." The battle royale had once again begun. All of them were fighting with each other, trying to get close to Ling Han. Capturing this brat would mean they would be able to obtain the treasured saber. As for Ling Han's own power, they had all automatically ignored any threat he could pose to them. He was after all only a brat in the 5th layer of element gathering tier. "You all, have you had enough?" Ling Han suddenly stood, his eyes cast over the group, holding a gaze that trembled with power. All of them experienced a shock. It was as if the young man standing in front of them was not a little martial artist of element gathering tier, but an ultimate warrior even stronger than the elders of their respective clans. They all felt indescribably weak and minuscule in front of Ling Han. But they immediately came back to themselves. Just a little brat, and he actually gave them such a feeling? This was really much too shameful. "Hand over the treasured saber quickly." Li Yuan once again moved, making a grabbing motion towards Ling Han. "Get lost." Ling Han waved the saber in a slash. Shwa! A bright flash washed out from the saber, as bright as a shooting star. Pooh! Li Yuan suddenly stumbled backwards, one hand pressing down on his chest. Fresh blood gushed forth from between his fingers, and his face had instantly turned pale. What? All of the others were flabbergasted with shock. One has to know that Li Yuan was in the 9th layer of Gushing Spring tier, yet he was actually injured with one wave of Ling Han's saber. How could they accept this reality? The treasured saber. It must be the might of the treasured saber. It was nothing new for them to have obtained damaged spiritual tools. After all, it was as if all of them were dead. The value of them lay only in the martial intent engraved in the seals upon the body of these spiritual tools. But Ling Han had barely just obtained this treasured saber, yet he could actually activate the might of the treasured saber. How inconceivable was that? Ling Han stood, wielding the saber in his hands, and asked, "Just now, you all really had fun ganging up on me, huh?" Hiss. All of them could not help but take a step back. Who would have thought that a little junior in the 5th layer of Element Gathering tier would suddenly possess the ability to pose a threat to high-level martial artists of Gushing Spring tier? There was no way that Ling Han would stay nice. He pounced, and the treasured saber in his hand continuously spat out flashes of light. The might of the treasured saber was not something that mere Gushing Spring tier martial artists could stand steadfast against. As the light from the treasured saber washed over them, without an exception, all of them were flung backwards from the power behind the blows. How could this be? This brat actually managed to resuscitate the spiritual tool. I don't believe it. All spiritual tools that can be successfully captured had their spirits deteriorated. Not even powerful warriors of spiritual ocean tier would be able to activate their abilities. Yet how could it be that a little brat of Element Gathering tier actually managed to activate the might of the spiritual tool? Everyone were gasping in astonishment, stuck in a state of absolute disbelief. But so what if they did not believe it? Now, they could only suffer a harsh thrashing from Ling Han's hands. "Aya!" They all shouted and screamed. Just now, Ling Han had suffered severe injuries from their hands, and now the tables were turned. So how could it be that he would be merciful towards them? As the light from the saber danced, all these people were easily thrashed. As for Lu Buchang, his face continued to twitch uncontrollably. Thank goodness he had acted to stop Lu Yutong, and so did not take part in the ganging up on Ling Han. Otherwise, he would not have been missed out in this thrashing. To be thrashed in this manner by a little junior. How humiliating. But was this brat a monster? Why was it that he could activate an ancient spiritual tool? After Ling Han had heavily thrashed Li Yuan and the others, he stared at Lu Buchang for a moment. This stare from Ling Han caused coldness to rise within the latter's heart, and Ling Han finally lowered the saber's hilt, sighing secretly. This saber was much too heavily damaged, and the spirit within was already long dead. The only thing left behind was a tiny scrap of consciousness. Because his martial intent was in the same vein as Zhang Yufeng's, he managed to activate this scrap of consciousness. But he would not be able to use it many more times before even this tiny scrap of consciousness would completely deteriorate. By that time, aside from being a bit sharper, there would be no difference between this saber and other normal weapons. "Ling Han, are you all right?" Lu Yutong and Li Xichan both stepped forward at the same time. How could this brat not be all right? Can't you two see that the others are all heavily thrashed? Lu Buchang mocked in his thoughts. Ling Han was filled with troubled thoughts, so he only nodded towards these two girls before taking the saber and returning to his own tent. Though he had injured a lot of people, it was absolutely normal for injuries and fights to result from fighting over treasures. Moreover, with Wu Songlin's support and having to give face to Wu Songlin, who would dare say anything? Moreover, a large group of Gushing Spring tier martial artists actually lost against a young man in the 5th layer of Element Gathering tier. How could they actually lower their pride to say that they would attempt revenge or something of the sort? Ling Han sat within his tent and placed the saber on his lap, studying it closely. If the spirit within had not died, based on his current power, there was no way he could manage to control this saber. The saber would only need to emanate a little bit of aura, and he would be killed off. But now, this actually gave him the chance to study it closely. Zhang Yufeng had broken through to heaven tier. Ling Han first confirmed this fact, because the martial intent engraved in the seals on the saber had reached the level that was equal to his own level in his last life. Thus, it was without question that this was a spiritual tool that Zhang Yufeng had forged after he had broken through to Heaven Tier. But a weapon of an ultimate warrior of Heaven Tier was actually heavily damaged in battle, and even the spirit within this spiritual tool was dead. What kind of enemy did Zhang Yufeng actually encounter? Moreover, Zhang Yufeng's talent was the lowest among all his disciples. Since even he had managed to break through to Heaven Tier, his other 3 disciples would all have definitely broken through too. If the 4 of them joined forces, Ling Han could think of no one that could defeat them. Yet Zhang Yufeng's weapon was actually so completely broken from what looked to be a huge battle, and came floating out on the waters of an underground river with other spiritual tools. Could there have been a battle royale among the ultimate warriors of Heaven Tier? Ling Han lightly knocked on the saber's blade. He had already decided that no matter what, he would have to go to the source of the underground river to take a look. However, he managed to activate the spiritual tool and had even defeated a large group of gushing spring tier elites. This naturally engendered the interest and attention of the higher ranks, so he was invited over that night, apparently to study the secrets behind the spiritual tools together. Ling Han did not refuse. He too wanted to take a look at the other spiritual tools. As a result, on this night, a total of 11 spiritual tools were placed on a table in front of him. All of them looked heavily worn out, as if they were damaged. If it was not said, who would believe that the things lying on this table were all immeasurably valuable? Young friend Ling, how did you manage to resuscitate the spiritual tool? A spiritual ocean tier warrior from the Zhao clan asked. His name was Zhao Wuxia, and in his younger days, his nickname was Nobleman Wuxia. His reputation as a romantic had once spread through the entire imperial city, but unfortunately, he was already in his twilight years now, so the charm and grace of his youth were long gone. This old man was already in the 9th layer of spiritual ocean tier, and had been stuck for many years. Even if he managed to advance and break through to spiritual pedestal tier, he would not have too many years to enjoy his new position. After all, anyone who did not manage to break through to flower blossom tier were all mortals. The only difference was whether they were weaker or stronger mortals. Ling Han smiled and said, I don't know either. I had only grabbed the spiritual tool, and somehow naturally gotten the acknowledgement of the spiritual tool. The 7 old men who were seated all showed expressions of disbelief. However, because Ling Han represented Wu Songlin, no matter how displeased they were, they dared not show it too openly. Zhao Wuxia smiled and said, Then that is really a coincidence. Somehow, young friend Ling is the one who encountered this kind of coincidence. That's right. I never imagined that something so coincidental would happen either. Ling Han laughed as he took up one of the spiritual tools from the table and studied it closely. The 7 old men did not stop him. They were all observing every move that Ling Han made. Perhaps the key to activating these spiritual tools was some kind of special movement, so they naturally would not miss out on any single movement from Ling Han. But they were destined to be disappointed because this time, Ling Han was really just studying these spiritual tools. All of these spiritual tools were heavily damaged, and the spirits of some of them had completely deteriorated. Moreover, the martial intent engraved in the seals on these spiritual tools were completely of a different vein than Ling Han's own. So to him, all these spiritual tools were the same as mere trash. Of course, the martial intent engraved in the seals on these spiritual tools still possessed a high value for research, because Ling Han could confirm that these were all level 9 spiritual tools, forged by the powerful warriors of Heaven Tier. He rubbed his chin and slipped into pensive thought. In that generation of his, there were merely 7 powerful warriors of Heaven Tier. Even if his 4 disciples very quickly made their way up into the ranks of Heaven Tier, after he died, there would have been only 10 Heaven Tier warriors. Yet just here, there were already 11 spiritual tools. Ling Han had seen it very clearly. The martial intents engraved within these 11 spiritual tools were all different. In other words, they were forged by 11 Heaven Tier warriors. Moreover, these spiritual tools were only those that had been successfully fished. An even larger number of spiritual tools had not yet had their spirits deteriorated, and had long escaped capture. Going by these calculations, exactly how many powerful warriors of Heaven Tier had there been? 100? 1,000? How could there have been so many? Ling Han did not understand. Could it be that after he had died, a golden age came to the field of martial arts, allowing heaven-tier warriors to rise up one after another? If that was not the case, how else could this be explained? He closely studied the other 10 spiritual tools. The martial intents engraved on them were all very unfamiliar, and definitely did not belong to the other 6 rulers that had been his equals. It looks like unless he headed to the source of the underground river, there was no way for him to get more information. Ling Han shook his head and placed the spiritual tool back down on the table. He asked, "Everyone, have you managed to think of some way to break through the invisible blockade to advance to the source of the underground river?" Hearing him address them as everyone, Zhao Wuxia and the others all revealed expressions of displeasure. The hierarchy of martial arts was extremely strict, and a little martial artist of element gathering tier actually dared act so casually in front of them. Yet the latter represented Wu Songlin, and Wu Songlin was in spiritual pedestal tier, and so was much stronger than them. Going by this calculation, Wu Songlin's representative indeed had the right to be their equal. They all felt aggrieved, and started to grumble about Wu Songlin. Why had he sent such a representative over? Wasn't this a deliberate insult to them? There is no way to break through that blockade. Most likely, even spiritual pedestal tier warriors would be helpless against it, unless that person is willing to come. Zhao Wuxia shook his head, but when he said the last few words, his eyes fell upon an old man. This was a man of the imperial Qi family, and his name was Qi Jiushan. The other 5 spiritual ocean tier warriors all nodded. That person was of course the mysterious Flower Blossom tier warrior of the Qi clan. In their eyes, Flower Blossom tier was the strongest level in this world, able to do the impossible. Yet Ling Han could not agree with this opinion. Flower Blossom tier had indeed left the bounds of mortality and possessed unbelievable power. For example, possessing a lifespan of up to 300 years, or for another example, being able to soar through the skies. However, the spiritual tools here were all as high as level 9, and what could a level 6 Flower Blossom tier martial artist do against level 9 spiritual tools? At that time, it was even likely that ultimate warriors of heaven tier had died in battle, and had their spiritual tools broken. So how could it be that the invisible wall could be dispersed by Flower Blossom tier martial artists? He did not point this out because this was too universally shocking a thing to mention. It would be best for him to maintain a low profile. "Tomorrow I would like to go take a look," he said. Immediately there were objections, yet even more nodded in agreement. "Young friend, please do. You are representing Grandmaster Wu, so do have this right," Qi Jiushan said with a smile. Damn, what a fake smile, Ling Han thought secretly. He knew that these 7 people were still suspicious of him, wanting to see if he had some kind of special method to disperse the blockade. He did not expose their thoughts and simply nodded before taking the treasured saber and leaving. On the next day, he, together with Lu Yutong and Li Sichuan, followed the river's course upstream. He had originally intended to advance on his own, but could not win against the pleas of the 2 girls, so he could only bring them along. Behind them followed Zhao Wuxia and the others, altogether 14 spiritual ocean tier martial artists, including a few who had not participated in their discussion the night before. Today they had all come. The source of this underground river was the foot of the mountain, and there was no way to advance further. They could only dive into the water in order to advance further. There are no martial artists who do not know how to swim, so they all went into the water. They had not advanced much before everything in front of them turned dark. If they advanced a bit more, they wouldn't even see the fingers of their own hands anymore. They could only feel the bone-piercing cold of the river's waters. Thankfully, there was air circulating in the underground river. Otherwise, no matter how much better they were at holding their breaths than normal people, they would not be able to swim too far. After at least an hour, there actually appeared a spark of light flickering in front of them. At first, Ling Han thought that they had finally come out of the mountain, and the exit was in front of them, but very quickly he realized something was not right. It was actually a seal made up of rays of light, as if a fishing net was stretched out in front of them, stopping them from advancing further. This is light of God. In his last life, Ling Han had once ventured into quite a number of ancient historical sites, and in some of them, there was this light of God. Shattering Void Tier lay above Heaven Tier, and it was rumored that those who managed to cultivate Shattering Void Tier to completion had the ability to shatter the void and truly transform into gods. Thus, the restrictions laid down by ultimate warriors of Shattering Void Tier were also known as Light of God. In his last life, because of his search for ways to break through to Shattering Void Tier, Ling Han had practically scoured through all the ancient historical sites he could find. As a result, he had seen this Light of God many times. A large part of the rumors could not be relied on. According to his deductions, Light of God should not have been set up by Shattering Void Tier warriors, but rather the remaining divine light that emanated from the remains of these warriors after their deaths. When he thought this, Ling Han could not help his thoughts taking a sudden turn. Could it be that a powerful warrior of Shattering Void Tier had risen at that time, and for some reason, became the target of Jiang Yufeng and the others ganging up on him? Should an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void Tier display his might, then it would not be strange for so many Heaven Tier warriors to die in battle against such an opponent. Of course, there was another possibility, and that was that a lot of Heaven Tier warriors had discovered the tomb of an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void Tier. In order to fight over the relics and treasures left behind by the Shattering Void Tier warrior, they were embroiled in a grand battle royale. The result was uncountable injuries and deaths, and the breakage of their spiritual tools. With this comparison in mind, Ling Han was more willing to believe that it was the former possibility. Young friend, is there any way to break this restriction? Zhao Wuxia asked. There is. Ling Han nodded. If it was any other restriction, he would indeed have no idea, but it was the light of God. In his last life, he had broken this restriction who knows how many times. This had nothing to do with cultivation level. What was needed were the necessary ingredients. What? Zhao Wuxia and the others gasped in unison. Zhao Wuxia had simply asked in passing, and had not placed any hopes that Ling Han would be able to break the restriction. He had never imagined that Ling Han would give him such an unexpected answer. Is that true? Hearing Ling Han's answer, it rather caused a considerable amount of doubt to arise in the others. After all, Ling Han was only in element gathering tier, so he was really much too weak in their eyes. You can choose not to believe me, but if you want me to break this seal, I need a few ingredients. If you can get me these ingredients, then I will immediately be able to break this seal, Ling Han declared. Please tell us, young friend, what ingredient do you require? Zhao Wuxia asked. Ling Han opened his mouth and recited the names of a colossal amount of ingredients. The names of these ingredients caused the faces of Zhao Wuxia and the others to turn green, and some of them even looked like they were about to spit out fire. This was practically asking them to spend their entire family fortunes. Whenever you can gather all these ingredients, then I'll be able to unseal this barrier. If you have yet to gather these ingredients, then please do not come to disturb me. Ling Han flung out these words, and brought the two girls ahead to go back the way they had come, leaving behind these 10+ old men to exchange looks of indecision. Do you all think that the words of this brat could be believed? Zhao Wuxia asked, breaking the tension. Since he is Grandmaster Wu's representative, then he should not have been speaking without thinking. But this brat is only 16 or 17 years old. Does he really have such ability? It may be true that he is indeed an exceptional genius. He would not have been able to become Grandmaster Wu's representative otherwise. All of you need not trouble yourselves with these worries. This brat requires so many extremely valuable ingredients. It is already not something that can be decided by us. We had best immediately send a messenger bird back to the Imperial City to inform our respective clan elders. That's true. They all nodded in agreement, and when they went back, all of them immediately sent off messenger birds to contact the Imperial City. Messenger birds were actually a kind of demonic beasts that, after being trained, could be used as messengers. They were extremely fast in flight and could travel a few thousand miles in a single day. Thus, on the next day, they all received a reply, telling them to agree to Ling Han's request, and that all of the clans would send out spiritual pedestal tier warriors to personally deliver the ingredients over. After all, these ingredients were really much too valuable. Probably even half of the national treasury would be emptied due to such expense. A mere 4 days later, a few high-ranking persons of spiritual pedestal tier had arrived, together with the ingredients that Ling Han had asked for. "Little fellow, you're so young, but you know quite a lot." A kind, gentle-looking old man entered into Ling Han's tent and smiled at him very serenely, as if he was looking at his own grandson. Yet Lu Yutong showed an expression of fear. This old man was the elder of the Li clan, and his name was Li Zhongyi, an authentic spiritual pedestal tier warrior. But don't take his kind and gentle expression at face value. In truth, this old man was a vicious and merciless character, possessing a great reputation in the imperial city from the numbers that had died in his hands. In his youth, who knows how much blood had stained his hands. Now he was much older, and had put most of his time into trying to break through to Flower Blossom tier, which allowed his bloody reputation to diminish. Only the people of the older generation now knew of this god of death. Ling Han laughed and said, "I like to learn a lot of different things, so I have a bit of knowledge about a lot of different areas. Light of God was not something that could be broken through brute force. Even ultimate warriors of heaven tier could do nothing against it." As a result, Ling Han had tried a lot of methods before finally coming up with a technique that could allow him to open a door in the light of God. It really is good to be young and have a lot of time on your hands. You can learn anything you like, unlike me. I already have half a foot in the coffin, and when I close my eyes to sleep tonight, I don't even know if I will be able to open them tomorrow morning, Li Zhongyi said with a laugh. However, his laughter was a bit frightening to hear, causing goosebumps to rise on the skin of Lu Yutong, and Li Sichan Ling Han did not mind in the slightest. He had once been an ultimate warrior of heaven tier in his last life, so would he be frightened by a spiritual pedestal tier martial artist? That has to be a joke. "Please return, elder. I need to do some preparations, and after about a day, I will be done and ready to break that barrier," Ling Han said. Li Zhongyi could not help be surprised. This brat actually dared to chase him off? However, he now had something to request of the latter, so he did not dare to refuse. He could only make a move and leave the tent. "Who? The old ghost is finally gone." Ling Han breathed out a breath of relief and quickly picked out a few valuable medicinal ingredients from the large amount of ingredients and began to concoct alchemical pills in the first instant. Lu Yutong and Li Sichan were shocked to numbness when they saw this. It seems like Ling Han had attained his own ends by abusing his position and had named a lot of unnecessary ingredients to concoct alchemical pills for his own use. To actually dare to scam the imperial family of Rain Country and the 8 great clans, Ling Han has got to be the only one. That was natural. To ask him, the Alchemy Emperor, to do something for them, how could they not offer something equal in value to their request as payment? Ling Han was at full power and did not rest for the whole day and night, continuing to concoct a large number of alchemical pills. When it was dawn the next day, he snickered and threw a pill bottle over to Lu Yutong and Li Sichan respectively, and said, "This is your share of benefits and the payment for you keeping quiet." In the previous day, the 2 girls had both become his assistants, doing chores like separating the various medicinal ingredients. Otherwise, Ling Han would really not have been able to complete this large number of pills. 4 transformations pill. Ancient clear pill. Li Sichan's beautiful eyes swept over the pill bottles and instantly gasped out in surprise. There was a clear expression of astonishment on her pretty face. There actually exists someone who can concoct these pills in this world. What 4 transformations pill? Ancient clear pill? Lu Yutong did not know much about the field of alchemy, so her face was filled with confusion. They are all spiritual medicines that can help raise one's cultivation level, and their effects are 10 times better than similar pills that are available now. But the 4 transformations pill is to be used by Gushing Spring tier, while the Ancient Clear pill should be used in Element Gathering tier, Li Sichan explained. This time, Lu Yutong's expression had changed completely. 10 times the effects, what kind of concept was that? She would be able to reach the 9th layer of Gushing Spring tier within a year's time, and begin breaking through to Spiritual Ocean tier. When she just thought that she would be only 20 years old and yet reach spiritual ocean tier, she was almost ready to pass out. Ling Han laughed. The alchemical pills concocted by others indeed had 10 times the normal effects, but the pills he concocted would at least be worth 13 stars, and have at least 30% additional effects in addition to the 10 times. But he would not be mentioning that lest he scared these two girls to death. Doing good without hoping for rewards wasn't the least bit in line with Ling Han's personality. Since they wanted him to open up the light of God, then how could he not take advantage of this chance to get some benefits of his own? Putting it in a different way, asking an ultimate warrior of heaven tier to do something for them while offering this little bit of payment, it was already nice of him to agree. Let's go. We can't have them wait too long. It would be impolite, he said. The two girls instantly rolled their eyes at him. The truth of the matter was that he had spent the whole day and night concocting alchemical medicines rather than doing any kind of preparations. He was obviously the one to have them wait pointlessly for a whole day, and he actually dared to say that. He really was shameless. The three of them left their tent. Those old monsters of spiritual pedestal tier had all waited for a long time, but old monsters would be old monsters. There was absolutely no hint of impatience on their faces. On the other hand, they were actually all smiles. All of them are really old foxes, scheming, astute and wily. Ling Han mocked in his thoughts as he opened his mouth and said, "I've caused all you seniors to wait for too long. Many apologies. Young friend, you've worked hard." Those old monsters of spiritual pedestal tier all said with a smile. "Then let's set out." Ling Han quickly went into the main topic. He had already gotten the benefits he wanted, and he too wanted to quickly reach the source of the underground river to see what had actually happened there. All of the old monsters were a bit surprised, for Ling Han was behaving much too calmly. They were all in spiritual pedestal tier, and were the strongest people in the whole Rain country. Should any one of them simply stomp their foot, they could easily cause the mountains and rivers to change. And now, they were all gathered in one place, yet Ling Han did not even blink at their presence. How could they not be curious about the reason behind his calmness? Yet they did not know something. Compared to Ling Han's power in his last life, what could mere spiritual pedestal tier count as? Hey, they wouldn't even be qualified to guard his door. The group once again returned to the spot they had stopped at before, and the light of God was once again right in front of them. Ling Han began to arrange the ingredients. One after another, the ingredients were smoothly arranged by his hands, becoming a blur in the eyes of the others. Yet, there was a beauty in his movements that caused the others to uncontrollably become engrossed in watching him. I actually seem to feel a kind of rhythmic beauty from this brat's movements. So you also feel that way? This brat is really quite strange, as if every move he makes corresponds with the Tao of nature. How could there be such a person? Could it be? It is written in the ancient records that there is a kind of person that is born suited to Tao. For such a person, comprehending the secrets of martial arts is as easy as drinking water. Natural martial body. The eyes of all the old monsters lit up. If Ling Han was really a natural martial body, then he was definitely a valuable treasure. As long as one observed his movements every single day, they'd be able to very quickly gain comprehension of martial arts. Ling Han could absolutely be considered as a living spiritual treasure of martial arts. This brat has gotten the acknowledgement of Wu Songlin, so they couldn't really kidnap him by force. But what about marriage? As long as they managed to get him to marry into their clan, then it would be perfectly legitimate for him to stay in their clan residence, and even Wu Songlin would be unable to say anything against that. Ling Han had completely no idea that he had become something that everyone would be fighting over in that instant. He had his full concentration on the ingredients in his hands, and as he flung out one after another, he actually opened up a hole in the light of God, creating an opening that could allow a single person to pass through. He really succeeded. The old monsters were all struck dumb with shock. They had all made their own attempts these few days, but the might of the light of God was not something they could overcome. All they could do was simply stare at it blankly. They had never thought that Ling Han would actually succeed. This naturally increased their desires to have him marry into their clans. One of the old monsters was an impatient character. and was about to immediately pass through the opening. Yet Ling Han stretched out an arm to stop him from going ahead and said, "Wait, brat, what are you trying to do?" This old monster was a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier of the Chen clan of the 8 great clans. He had an impatient nature and was also bad-tempered. He immediately glared at Ling Han, and a strong pressure immediately emanated from him. Ling Han smiled calmly, withdrew his arm and said, "If you want to die, I won't stop you. Please go right ahead." Hearing Ling Han's words, the old monster from the Chen clan did not dare to make any reckless moves and asked, "Isn't the restriction already broken?" This can only be claimed to be a minor success. The current opening can allow an ordinary person to enter, but body refining tier would experience rejection from the restriction. The stronger your ability, the more powerful the rejection you would feel. If you try to force your way through, that would be equivalent to seeking your own death, Ling Han said. "So that was it. Stupid brat, why didn't you speak early of such a big issue? You almost killed me," the old monster from the Chen clan said sheepishly, obviously a bit embarrassed. Ling Han smiled and said, "Do you not see that I have many ingredients that I haven't used yet? Wouldn't this be embezzlement on my part?" The old monsters all laughed loudly while Lu Yutong and Li Xichan kept mocking in their thoughts. This guy was so outrageously bold. He had already embezzled a lot. Ling Han continued to move and threw out various ingredients, allowing the opening to become firmer and sturdier. Now, body refining tier should be able to enter. And now element gathering tier should be able to as well. Gushing spring tier. Ling Han suddenly came to a stop, because the ingredients had all been used up. He gave a sigh and said, "My ability is limited, so I can only create an opening that would allow only gushing spring tier martial artists to enter at most." The others all stared blankly. The strongest martial artists that could enter was gushing spring tier. Was this deliberate? That's right. This was something that Ling Han had done deliberately. Originally, he had intended to have this opening limited to allowing only element gathering tier to enter, but he thought that this would be too obvious, so he decided to raise the entry level to the next tier. But on the other hand, Rain Country had limited resources on hand, so even if he had not had his own intentions, the opening that he could create would at most only allow spiritual ocean tier martial artists to enter. Only gushing spring tier. The old monsters all frowned. What about this? Let us immediately send a message back to the Imperial City and have the gushing spring tier martial artists of our clans all come over immediately, someone suggested. Behind this opening possibly lay hidden a great secret treasure. Who would not want to get their hands on this treasure? These few days, we'll seal off this place first, and allow no one to pass through, Li Zongyi said. We should do that. All of them were worried that someone else would enter first and snatch away some fated opportunity that could be hidden behind the opening. So they all agreed to first seal off this place and wait for the various geniuses of gushing spring tier of their respective clans to arrive, after which all of them would enter at the same time. Little fellow, you have no objection, right? Li Zongyi said with a cunning smile. Of course not. Ling Han said with a smile. However, you all would need to make the most of your time. This opening can at most be maintained for 10 days only. Damn! The old monsters all rolled their eyes at this. Then why didn't you say this sooner? That way, they'd have been able to gather the geniuses of their clans early on to come over. But now, everything was in a rush, so they weren't sure how many they could actually gather. All of them once again left, and naturally, one after another messenger birds flew off, sending the message back to the Imperial City. Ling Han sat in his tent, quietly cultivating. He had practically robbed the 8 great clans and the imperial family in one go this time, and had managed to concoct various valuable alchemical pills, which would be enough for him to enjoy quite a while without worrying about money. Robbery is really fun, he thought as he swallowed an alchemical pill. For days passed very quickly and continuously, there would be arrivals of various young men and women. These were all the younger generation of the 8 great clans and the imperial family. They were either gushing spring tier or, at the very least, element gathering tier. Obviously, the old monsters suspected that there lay a secret treasure behind the restriction, and hoped that the youths of their own clans would be able to get this secret treasure. Thus, they naturally sent as many people as they could. On the 7th day, there were about 200 people of the younger generation of the various clans that had made it there. The old monsters also felt that they could no longer delay it, because there was only 3 days' time left for them. Set out. Within these few days, Ling Han and the two girls also achieved their own breakthroughs. Lu Yutong had accumulated energy for a long time, plus she also had the 3 vanishing veins which, together with the 3 mysterious arts, allowed her to maintain an overwhelmingly rapid cultivation pace. Moreover, she also had in her hands the 4 transformations pill, so naturally her cultivation speed was even faster than before. Most importantly, the 4 transformations pill would help her break through to the 2nd layer of gushing spring tier. For most people, the barrier between cultivation levels was the hardest to pass. As long as you were willing to put in real effort, or had enough alchemical pills to support your cultivation, you would be able to smoothly cultivate from the early period of any layer all the way to the peak period. But to successfully break through, that was another problem. Even if it was only from the 1st layer of gushing spring tier to the 2nd, this one step forward was extremely difficult to take. Why were there so few spiritual pedestal tier warriors in Rain Country? That was simple, they did not have enough comprehension of their cultivation levels, and were all stuck in spiritual ocean tier. And below spiritual ocean tier, there was also a large number of people who were stuck in gushing spring tier and element gathering tier. The 4 transformations pill could help a martial artist gain the comprehension of his cultivation level. If this spread out, it would be a hair-raising shock to anyone who found out. Lu Yutong was intelligent in the first place, plus she had already been at the peak period of the 1st layer of gushing spring tier. Now that she had the aid of the 4 transformations pill, after a few days trying to break through, everything naturally went smoothly and she advanced to the next level. She did not continue to raise her cultivation level. Instead, she put effort into strengthening her foundation. After all, she managed to reach her cultivation level with the help of medicine, so if she was too greedy and continued to advance, it would lead to her foundation being unstable. In the future, this would mean that she would be unable to reach a higher cultivation level. Ling Han also taught her the 4 seasons sword technique, which was a black-grade high-level martial arts technique. Chances were high that not even the Lu clan had this kind of martial arts technique. Perhaps only the imperial family owned such a high-level martial arts technique. Thus, Lu Yutong had broken through the day before yesterday. After breaking through, she had spent the last 2 days studying the secrets of the 4 seasons sword technique, and if there was anything she didn't understand, she would ask Ling Han. As a result, her power rose at an extremely quick pace. A gushing spring tier elite actually asked for guidance about martial arts technique from an element gathering tier martial artist. This seemed to be a preposterous thing, yet Lu Yutong and Li Xichan both felt that this was very natural and there was nothing strange about it. Ling Han was too much of a monster. Had he been now able to use heaven-grade martial arts techniques, most likely the 2 girls would have only given an ah, and then accept reality. Li Xichan also managed to advance from the 3rd layer of element gathering tier to the 4th layer. Most alchemists were pill bottles, depending on alchemical pills to forcibly raise their cultivation levels, so naturally her body was highly immune to medicinal effects. Thankfully, her cultivation level was still low, so this immunity to medicines was not too strong. Thus she also managed to advance to the next layer. Meanwhile, Ling Han broke through to the 6th layer of element gathering tier, and while his cultivation level was very low, his battle prowess was an extremely terrifying thing. 5 elements origin nuclei, 6 flashes of sword chi, indestructible heaven scroll, body of dead tree. All these added together would be enough to raise his attack power to 15 stars, while his defenses were even stronger. It would not be wrong to claim his defenses reached the level of 20 stars. It's still not enough. Ling Han shook his head. Only once he stepped into gushing spring tier would he be able to use black-grade high-level martial arts techniques. The power upgrade from black-grade martial arts techniques was not something that yellow-grade martial arts techniques could compare to. He was sitting on a mountain of treasures, yet he could only sigh. This feeling really displeased him. Lu Yutong only rolled her eyes at him. This guy was only in the 2nd layer of body refining tier just over half a year ago, yet he had already broken through to the 6th layer of element gathering tier now, and he still thought that it was too slow. What about other normal martial artists then? They left their tents to meet with the others. Yutong. So you've already arrived. When a young man saw Lu Yutong, he immediately approached them. This man was Hubo. Watch my sword. When Lu Yutong saw him, she did not say anything else, but simply drew her sword and attacked him. That day, Hubo, in order to find her, went over to the Ling clan residence and made a huge commotion, killing and injuring a considerable number of people, which caused her to feel extremely guilty. Now that she had seen him, it was as if she had seen a mortal enemy. How could she hold herself back anymore? Naturally, from the first instant she saw him, she immediately began attacking him. What? When Lu Yutong attacked him, Hubo's expression immediately changed. Second layer of gushing spring tear. She had actually reached the second layer of gushing spring tear. Previously, when he had seen Lu Yutong in Grey Cloud Town, she had just broken through to gushing spring tear, and now it was only half a month later and she had already reached the second layer of gushing spring tear. The word genius was no longer enough to describe her, right? She was like him who had also gotten the full support of his clan to develop his talent, but he was still in the peak period of the first layer of gushing spring tear. It would at least be another month before he would be able to break through, and his progress was already very much praised by his clan, and he was claimed to be an exceptional genius. Yet when compared to Lu Yutong, he was an absolute idiot. Being under the fierce attacks of an elite of the second layer of gushing spring tear, how could Hubo dare to hesitate any further? He quickly drew his own sword. If he had any slightest bit of reservations at this moment, he was likely to be defeated. If he were defeated by a woman he was pursuing, how would he still have the face to see Lu Yutong in the future? Ding, 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 ding. The two long swords continued to clash with each other, creating fierce sparks of fire from the friction. Ordinarily, the second layer of gushing spring tear against the first layer would be a completely one-sided domination battle, but Lu Yutong had just broken through. Moreover, her breakthrough was successful because she had used alchemical pills, so her foundation was not yet strong enough, which naturally affected her battle prowess. And though Hubo had also reached his current cultivation level with the help of alchemical pills, he had after all been stuck at the peak period of the first layer for quite some time, so naturally, he had already solidified his foundation. Thus, the battle prowess these two could display was more or less equal, and it would be difficult to decide the victor of this battle in a short period of time. Isn't this the Pearl of the Lu clan? Why is she so strong? That's right, I remember that just barely half a year ago, she was still in the 8th layer of element gathering tier, and it should be at least another 2 years before she'd be able to break through to gushing spring tier. Yet she is now actually in the 2nd layer of gushing spring tier. This is practically unbelievable. TSK. This beautiful flower is really getting harder and harder to pluck. However, she is also becoming more and more desirable. Such talent. TSK. 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 I have my eye on this woman. Nonsense. You think you're worthy of her. Those who were gathered were all embroiled in their discussions. They were all either from the imperial family or the 8 great clans, and all of their clans had power that was no weaker than the Lu clans. And since they were able to come here, this also meant that their power and talent were the best of the best, so naturally, all of them had their own pride. Lu Yutong had attacked for a very long time, yet did not manage to get the upper hand, so the flames of rage in her heart became stronger and stronger. She suddenly flicked her sword, and a powerful sword intent circulated through her sword, and her whole figure became extremely solemn. 4 Seasons Sword Techniques, a black-grade high-level martial arts technique. This sword technique was separated into 4 different parts, each representing spring, summer, autumn, and winter. In truth, it could be considered as 4 different sword techniques which combined into a major sword technique. The best scenario was for 4 different people to use each sword technique at the same time, which will drastically increase the power. But it was not impossible for a single person to circulate this sword technique. This required the user to have a high control over their sword, one move following after another. Spring followed by summer, autumn followed by winter, to form the cycle of the 4 seasons, which would also create a formidably powerful attack technique. Lu Yutong had only just learned a few moves of the spring rain sword technique, so naturally she was not able to form the cycle of seasons yet, which were the sword intents of spring rain, summer thunder, autumn wind and winter snow. However, black-grade high-level martial arts techniques were still black-grade high-level martial arts techniques. Any single move would be enough to create a terrifying power. Shwa! The light from the sword was extremely cold, and there actually appeared droplets of rain dancing through the air that followed the sword as it moved. It was an impressive sight. The beauty was like a painting, and her sword was like the most beautiful scene, causing all the others to feel as if they had become drunk just from watching her dance. Even some of them who had determined to spend their whole lives on martial arts now could not help their hearts from wavering, getting drunk from watching Lu Yutong's beauty. The beauty was like jade while her sword was like a rainbow, causing a lot of them to feel the urge to write a poem or sing a song in her honor. There was only one thing left to say: it was too beautiful. Meanwhile, Hu Bo did not have such a refined and elegant state of mind. On the contrary, he felt a colossal pressure, and beads of cold sweat continuously rolled down his forehead. Although Lu Yutong was as agile as a deity and her movements were so heartbreakingly beautiful, she was also like a female goddess of battle. The pressure emanating from her was so high that all his nerves were tensed. He almost felt like he wanted to throw away his sword and surrender. But if he were to give up so easily in front of so many eyes, he would definitely be harshly scolded by the elders of his clan upon his return. He gave a huge shout, and his sword quivered at a quick rhythm as he used his strongest martial arts technique. Cloud Slashing Sword. This was a secret art of the Hu clan and was also a black-grade martial arts technique, but was only a black-grade low-level martial arts technique. The Hu clan of course also had black-grade mid-level martial arts techniques, but those were the core secret treasures of the Hu clan. How could a junior that had just broken through to Gushing Spring Tier recently be allowed to learn these techniques? If one wanted to learn black-grade mid-level martial arts techniques, one would have to be at least in Spiritual Ocean Tier and prove that one was fully loyal to the clan, ensuring no possibility of betrayal. Hong! The two of them once again clashed together, and the environment immediately became explosive and fiery. Even a few of the old monsters had come out, observing the battle with a smile, hands behind their backs. Though this level of battle in their eyes was like a child's game, Lu Yutong and Hu Bo were both likely to reach their level in the future. So naturally, their attention was attracted. The Cloud Slashing Sword technique was a swift and fierce technique. It would even be able to cut the clouds floating in the sky in half. Thus it was a very overbearing sword technique. On the other hand, the Spring Rain Sword technique was like a gust of wind in spring transforming into rain, silently nurturing the earth, seeming very peaceful and beautiful, an extremely gentle technique. But why was the Spring Rain Sword technique a black-grade high-level martial arts technique then? Although the rain in spring was very gentle, but at the same time it could also contain killing intent. Shwa, shwa, shwa. Uncountable droplets of rain flew and danced in the air, and actually transformed into uncountable number of tiny needles, as if they were sharp swords that had shrunk an uncountable number of times. They pierced into the pores of Hu Bo's skin and went directly into his veins. These droplets of rain were all created by the Spring Rain Sword technique, and contained Lu Yutong's own origin power. Once they entered into Hu Bo's veins, they naturally contained a very strong destructive effect. They had only exchanged 3 moves, and Hu Bo's battle prowess took a drastic drop. He was completely dominated by Lu Yutong. Under the conditions where power was almost equal on both sides, the one who had the advantage in martial arts technique would naturally gain the upper hand. What more when this was a high-level martial arts technique dominating a low-level martial arts technique? The gap between the two was not just a little bit. Ling Han nodded slightly. Yutong truly was quite talented. She had already managed to grasp the concept behind the Spring Rain Sword technique. Although this was also in some part due to his guidance, it also proved that Lu Yutong had quite a high talent in the field of martial arts. Being able to move the spiritual qi in their surroundings and transform it into a real, solid attack, that was the strongest advantage of a black-grade martial arts technique. This can't be right. Even though Hu Bo cannot be considered to be part of the strongest elite in the younger generation of the Imperial City, he can definitely fit into the 3rd class, and definitely can be named as a well-known figure. How is it that he is so quickly at a disadvantage? It's not that Lu Yutong is so much stronger than him, but that her sword technique is much too scary, using softness to counter strength. It's a very mysterious sword technique. And if it was me against her, unless my power was strong enough to completely overwhelm her, I would be absolutely under her control because of this sword technique. Gods, what sword technique is that? The youths continued to discuss among themselves, and more old monsters were attracted to the commotion happening here. Their eyes were completely focused on Lu Yutong. The longer they watched her, the more anxious their expressions became, and the more of a very deep dread they contained. Honestly speaking, if they suppressed their power to about the same as Lu Yutong's current level, they would most probably only manage to achieve a tie in front of this sword technique, and this was still taking into account their abundant battle experience. How was this possible? They all had their own black-grade mid-level martial arts technique, as well as battle experience that exceeded Lu Yutong by who knew how many times. Yet if they battled with her on the same level, they could only manage a tie with Lu Yutong. Black-grade high-level martial arts technique. The old monsters all exchanged a look and mouthed these 6 words before they all turned their eyes towards the old monster from the Lu clan. They all only had black-grade mid-level martial arts technique, so there was a fine balance of power among all the 8 great clans. Yet now the Lu clan had a black-grade high-level martial arts technique, which naturally meant that this fine balance was broken. Even if the old monster of the Lu clan was in spiritual pedestal tier, he still started to sweat when he became the sudden focus of the attention of so many others of the same cultivation level. He began to rebuke Lu Yutong in his thoughts. Lu Yutong managed to learn such a powerful martial arts technique, yet did not save it as a trump card, and actually used it in front of so many people. Wouldn't that be trying to attract others to covet this sword technique? He wanted to claim that the Lu clan did not possess the sword technique, but also knew that the other old monsters would not believe him. Since Lu Yutong knew this sword technique, then wouldn't that be equivalent to the Lu clan also knowing this sword technique? But he was also extremely curious. Where had Lu Yutong learnt this sword technique from? Lu Yutong gave a light shout, and as she brandished her sword, the spring rain sword technique was becoming more and more well-practiced. It was a martial arts technique after all, and the main purpose of martial arts technique was to be used for battle, so naturally, she could only grasp the essence of the sword technique in true battle. The more she grasped of the essence of the spring rain sword technique, the more she looked as light as a deity. In the eyes of the audience, it was as if she was the fairy of the Jade Lake, dancing gracefully. As her sword danced, the rain droplets of spring danced with her continuously, creating a scene so beautiful it could cause suffocation. All the young men there revealed expressions of captivation. There was even a number of people who were no longer young, yet could feel their hearts wavering, as if they had returned to their youth when they would be pursuing beautiful sights and sounds, horses and dogs. Enough! The old monster from the Hu clan spoke, extending a hand. His origin power transformed into a giant palm that separated Lu Yutong and Hu Bo. This is just a spar. Take care not to overdo it. Let's just consider this as a tie. Hearing these words, all the others were snorting in derision in their thoughts. What do you mean by a tie? It would take at most another 3 moves, and Hu Bo would definitely be harshly defeated. But who dared to talk back against a spiritual pedestal tier warrior so publicly? Unless someone thought they had lived for too long and would like to end their life prematurely? Lu Yutong felt very regretful. She did not intend to defeat Hu Bo, but rather to teach him a good lesson he would remember strongly. Hu Bo stepped back, but there was confusion on his face. He did not understand why Lu Yutong had become so strong. And when he saw that Lu Yutong had stepped back and stood beside Ling Han, a terrifying killing intent rose up within his eyes. This brat was actually still pestering Lu Yutong. How hateful! Damn it! The stronger Lu Yutong was, and the more terrifying the talent in martial arts she displayed, the more he wanted to make this genius girl his. So, naturally, he could not bear to see her to be so close to any man. He was not the only one. When the young men in the area all saw this, they all looked at Ling Han with very unfriendly gazes. It was only now that they discovered that there was not only one beauty by Ling Han's side. There was another beauty that was completely not beneath Lu Yutong by his side. Li Xichan. Gods, the twin pearls of the imperial city that were so famous have all become his women? Damn this fucking bastard. And within this one instant, Ling Han had become public enemy number one. Any of them who had the slightest bit of interest in Lu Yutong or Li Xichen all considered Ling Han to be their rival. Moreover, the admirers of these two girls were enough to queue up in a line that could encircle the imperial city 3 times. So the number of new enemies Ling Han had gotten could be imagined. And this was only the younger generation of the 8 great clans and the imperial family. Brother Ling, I never thought you would have arrived so early. The 3rd imperial prince stepped out and gave Ling Han a friendly smile. He was a man that was meant for great things, so he would of course not lose himself in the beauty of women. Hee hee. Ling Han laughed and said, "Can we set off now?" He had already waited for quite a few days, and could no longer wait to find out the secrets hidden at the source of the underground river. Let's set out. One of the old monsters gave a wave of his hand. Previously, the youths of his own clan were not here, so he naturally could not allow anyone else to pass through that opening first. But things were different now. Whatever reminders needed were already given, and no one was now wasting their time on pointless chatter. They all entered the river's waters. They all passed through one by one, entering into the hidden area behind the light of God. Ling Han's expression instantly became serious. If a place had the light of God, then even he, someone who had once been an ultimate warrior of heaven tier in his last life, had to proceed cautiously lest any careless move on his part caused his death. The reason why he had been willing to create an opening and allow so many people entry was also because he intended to have these people enter first to scout out any possible dangers. Of course, fateful encounters were always accompanied by serious danger. If one wanted to obtain great rewards, one would of course have to prepare to face great risk. This would be fair to every single person. After the opening still lay a stretch of the underground river. They continued to advance, and soon, a piece of land appeared in front of them. At this moment, they should be deep within the blood-gushing mountain, yet it was actually empty inside, containing a gigantic empty space. They all stepped onto land. It was not too dark here, as there was a mysterious light flickering in the area that lit up the belly of this mountain. However, they were not able to see too far ahead, as if there was something that was hindering their sight. A lot of them separated from others and left. Even those who were from the same clan had divided themselves into quite a considerable number of teams. Firstly, this was to not put all their eggs in a single basket, and secondly, even those who came from the same clan may not be completely united and close to each other. In that case, it was best not to stick together. If they encountered danger, they not only would not help each other, they may even hinder each other. Very quickly, the group of people separated into their own groups and went towards all the different directions. Brother Ling, I shall take my leave first. The 3rd imperial prince raised his clasped hands in Ling Han's direction, with only the crimson-haired beauty by his side. Ling Han gave a nod and watched the 3rd imperial prince leave. All of a sudden, the area had become deserted, and only Ling Han, Lu Yutong, and Li Xichen were left behind. Where should we go? Lu Yutong asked. This place looked like a plain. Aside from the underground river behind them, every other direction was absolutely empty. She really did not know which direction they should decide on that would be the right choice. Ling Han took out the treasured saber and used his divine sense to communicate with the scrap of consciousness in the saber, wanting to incite the instinctive reaction of the treasured saber to find the remains of Zhang Yufeng. Yet, there was absolutely no reaction from the treasured saber. How strange. Ling Han frowned slightly. If Zhang Yufeng had really joined the ranks of Heaven Tier, then even if he had been dead for over 10,000 years, his body would still not decay. The ultimate warriors of Heaven Tier had already walked a very long way on the path of martial arts, and their martial intent was deeply carved into every drop of blood, every piece of flesh, and every bone in their bodies. From a certain point of view, the remains of these ultimate warriors could also be considered as a kind of spiritual tool. In truth, a large number of spiritual tools were made from the bones of extremely powerful demonic beasts. Human bones could also be used, of course. But that was much too terrifying, so practically nobody dared to do such a thing. Thus, the remains of the user and his spiritual tool contained the same martial intent, so they should be attracting each other, yet why was there completely no reaction at all? Unless, Ling Han's expression took a swift turn. Unless there was nothing left of Zhang Yufeng's body, then, naturally there would no reaction from his spiritual tool at all. But what had actually happened at that time that even the remains of an ultimate warrior of heaven tier had completely disappeared? "Let's just walk somewhere," he said. They didn't know which direction was the best anyways. The three of them advanced, and after they had walked for a while, Ling Han suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" Lu Yutong asked. Ling Han did not say anything. He went off slightly to the side of the direction they were heading in and came to the side of a huge boulder. The two girls followed in his footsteps, but did not see anything particularly interesting about this boulder. There was only a stalk of grass growing at the side of the boulder. If they had not examined it clearly, they would have thought that it was a piece of bone. "What kind of grass is that?" They were both very surprised. "This is bone-eating grass, and it will only grow on a dead body," Ling Han explained. There was something else that he did not say, and that was that only the dead bodies of at least deity transformation warriors would cause the growth of the bone-eating grass. "Yeah." The two girls instantly turned pale. Though the two of them were martial artists and death should be something very common to them, women would still be women. If a woman heard that she could possibly be stepping on a dead body, her heart would definitely skip a beat. Ling Han struck with a palm, and the huge boulder was flung away with the force of his strike. "Ah!" Both girls gasped in shock, for there was a skeletal hand extending out of the ground. The pure white finger bones emitted an eerie feeling. "Don't be afraid. He has been dead for over 10,000 years, Ling Han said. The two girls immediately rolled their eyes at this. This young man was highly intelligent, had exceptional talent in martial arts, and was impossibly capable in alchemy. Yet he was an absolute idiot when it came to his EQ. If they were afraid of this dead body, how could they still jump out to wound others in martial arts? Of course they were not afraid. Ling Han took out his sword and carefully dug away the soil around the skeletal hand. With the physical strength of an element-gathering tier martial artist, digging some soil was of course a piece of cake. Very soon, after the skeletal hand appeared a skeletal arm, followed by the shoulder, and quickly there appeared a skull that was in an upright position. "Why is it not lying down?" the two girls asked curiously. After death, it should be impossible for one to maintain a standing position. Could it be that someone had buried him standing up after this person had died? When the power of a martial artist has reached a certain level, and his martial intent is threaded through his entire body, then he would be able to remain standing for a few hundred years even after his death, Ling Han explained. My guess is that this person died from battle here and kept maintaining this pose. Afterwards, after an uncountable number of years, perhaps something happened on the surface, causing some rocks and soil to fall from the cave ceiling which completely buried his body. The two girls were both very astonished. A person would still be able to remain standing even after death? At least they had never heard of any powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier being able to do that kind of thing. Ling Han continued to dig, and soon, the complete remains were in front of their eyes. This was obviously a male, and there was still a suit of purple-colored embroidered robes that had not yet rotted on him. However, there was shockingly a hole on the chest area of the robes. This should be the location of the wound that had caused this person's death. Additionally, the rib in front of where the heart should have been when he was alive was broken. They could imagine that he had been embroiled in a fierce battle with another person, and his opponent had crushed his heart with a single punch, causing all life signs to be washed away from him after this blow. Yet, Ling Han directly removed the embroidered robes from the skeleton, causing the two girls to exclaim in disgust. This was something that had been worn by a corpse. Unfortunate. It's really too unfortunate. Ling Han sighed continuously. This is a secret treasure woven from purple jade silk. It's unfortunate that an extremely powerful blow has destroyed all its abilities. AI. He gave a light tug, and the embroidered robes were easily torn open. What is this purple jade silk? Lu Yutong asked. The purple jade heaven silkworm is a level 9 demonic beast, and the purple jade silk is the silk that is spat out by it, Ling Han explained very simply. Hiss! The two girls both inhaled sharply. A level 9 demonic beast. then wouldn't that be equivalent to heaven tier? A piece of clothing that is woven from the silk that is spat out by a level 9 demonic beast. That should be the ultimate kind of treasure. Such protective armor should be able to withstand at least over 100 continuous attacks from a heaven tier warrior before being destroyed. Yet from the looks of this hole, it was pierced open by a single punch. Ling Han raised his head and looked up with a burning stare. This proves that the shattering void tier indeed exists in this world. The reason why Ling Han had died in his last life was because of his quest to seek the secrets behind attaining shattering void tier. Now that he had seen a real proof of the existence of shattering void tier, he could not help but get excited. But after his wave of excitement had passed, all he felt was worry and incomprehension. Zhang Yufeng had obviously taken part in such a clash of the titans, but what was the reason for it? Everyone knew that the higher one's cultivation level was, the larger the difference there would be between the power levels of different cultivation levels. For example, he, at the 4th layer of element gathering tier, was able to pit himself even against an opponent in the 1st layer of gushing spring tier. But once he reached heaven tier, the difference of a single layer would be like the gap between heaven and earth. There existed a gulf that was impossible to cross between the 1st layer and the 2nd layer of heaven tier. If there really rose up an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier in this world, then that was definitely an invincible existence. Why would Zhang Yufeng still choose to battle such an opponent when he obviously knew he was no match for the latter? It would be fine if only one such idiot appeared. The thing was, there were too many of them, and all of them were powerful warriors of heaven tier. How could he believe such a thing? Beside this corpse also lay a sword, the martial intent of its previous user engraved within the seals carved onto it. This was an ultimate secret treasure, able to pass on the martial arts knowledge of this powerful warrior. Unfortunately, once it had left the restraints of the ground, the sword automatically awakened and transformed into a rainbow that exited via the water. In an instant, it had completely disappeared without any traces left behind. Ling Han shook his head with a sigh. The current him was really much too weak. Even if the greatest of treasures lay in front of him, he did not have the ability to make it his own. This feeling could really make one feel depressed. His eyes lit up all of a sudden. There was actually a ring on the finger of this corpse. If a powerful warrior such as this person was still wearing this kind of adornment, then one thing was clear. This ring was definitely a treasure. Could be a spiritual tool or could be a support-type treasure that could help one meditate and rest. But the biggest possibility of what it could be was spatial ring. It could create a dimension of its own that was a space for storage. Ling Han removed the ring, used his divine sense to scan over it, and could confirm that this was definitely the spatial ring that he had always wanted. What a huge reward, he thought. Even if he did not get anything else out of this journey, it was a big enough reward to have gotten this spatial ring. Your grin looks so terrifying. What is it? Li Sichan said, feeling a bit creeped out. The grin currently on Ling Han's face was really too scary. Ling Han laughed and said, "Let me show you a magic trick." He slipped the spatial ring onto his finger, then removed a pill bottle from his pocket. He waved it around a few times, indicating for the two girls to watch clearly. Then, with a shio, the pill bottle had disappeared. The two girls gasped in unison. How could a solid pill bottle just disappear like that? Aren't you going to give me some applause? Ling Han asked with a smile. How did you make the thing disappear? Li Sichan's eyes were wide open in a stare. If it was not the fact that Ling Han was male and she was female, she really wanted to search all over Ling Han's body. It would not be interesting if I tell you the trick to it. Ling Han laughed. He took out the pill bottles and monetary notes from his pockets and, one by one, stored them into the spatial ring. It truly was the spatial ring that once belonged to a heaven-tier warrior. The space inside was about as big as a whole house, so it could store a lot of things. The benefits of the spatial ring was not only the fact that it was convenient. Another advantage of it was that it could hide things very well. Unless the spatial ring was snatched away, there was no way the things stored inside would be found. In this tiny little rain country, probably no one else knew how to use the spatial rings. So Ling Han was very reassured. What Ling Han thought disappointing was the fact that the spatial ring was completely empty. There was nothing inside at all. There was no way an ultimate warrior of Heaven tier could be this poor, of course. Ling Han deduced that this warrior of Heaven tier was well aware that he was going to die in this battle, so he had left behind all the good stuff he owned to his descendants. The spatial ring most possibly only contained things like some alchemical pills that could replenish his origin power or heal his injuries, as well as his spiritual tools. Thus, the alchemical pills were used, and the spiritual tools were taken out to be used in battle, so there was naturally nothing left inside the spatial ring. Forget it, one can't be too greedy. Ling Han buried the corpse of this warrior, feeling a bit of sorrow as he did. How rare and powerful was a warrior of Heaven tier. Yet in the end, there wasn't even a person to collect his remains. One really has to sigh at this. Let's go. They continued to advance forwards. Those who had walked ahead of them had also discovered a corpse. Yet they were not as lucky as Ling Han, who had managed to obtain a spatial ring. They only saw a pile of white bones that shattered into dust upon a single touch. The remains of powerful warriors of Heaven tier should not be so feeble, but the appearance of the bone-eating grass has changed everything. The nutrients and essence of these bones have all been absorbed by the grass, so they had become the same as those of Immortal. Thus it was natural that they were unable to withstand the eroding powers of time. If Ling Han had come just a bit later, then the corpse he had discovered would not have been as intact. The essence of the bones had not yet been completely absorbed by the bone-eating grass, so naturally the bones were still able to maintain their sturdiness. The bone-eating grass was a very odd kind of plant. It could only grow on the remains of powerful warriors of at least deity transformation tier, yet it did not have any value by itself. The essence that it had sucked out would be directly returned to nature. It could be claimed as the garbage collector of nature. Ling Han's face became more and more somber. Just the way that he had passed, he could see no less than 20 corpses of these powerful warriors. 20 corpses. When have Heaven tier warriors become so cheap? What is that? Lu Yutong asked, suddenly pointing at a spot. Ling Han looked in the direction she was pointing at and saw that there was a white flower growing all alone there. The flower stem was like jade and its bud was about the size of a human fist. There was light glowing all around it. He suddenly gaped in shock, a disbelieving expression on his face. Even he, someone who had once been an ultimate warrior of Heaven tier, was very shocked. It was proof that this flower was definitely extraordinary. That was natural, because the light flickering around the flower was the same as the light that shone from the light of God. A level 10 spiritual medicine. This could be claimed as a medicine of the gods. This is a big bonus, a really big bonus. A strange light shone from Ling Han's eyes. In his last life, he had only heard of level 9 treasured medicines, and had hoped at least to see such an item once in his lifetime, yet had never thought that he would be able to come upon a level 10 godly medicine in this life. Could this kind of godly medicine in front of them allow one to immediately become a deity, and directly shatter the void to become a god? Ling Han did not know, but such a godly medicine was right in front of him. There was no justification to him simply passing by, ignoring it. He immediately walked towards the godly medicine, his expression unable to hide the excitement he was feeling. Stop right there. There was a cold humph and 4 men were racing over. Obviously, they had also discovered this stock of godly medicine, though they did not know its true value. How could Ling Han bother to pay them any attention? However, these 4 people were not just fast, they had also shot out a long-distance attack. Xiao! A flash of light from a saber swept over, a dominating pressure emanating from it. Lu Yutong drew her sword and, ding, managed to block this saber attack. All who manage to find the natural treasures of this world have a share to it. Let us first discuss how we are going to divide it among ourselves. A middle-aged man said as he neared them. Huang Zitao. Lu Yutong's elegant brow wrinkled into a slight frown, showing a sliver of dread in her expression. This man was a clansman of the Huang clan of the 8 great clans. In terms of age, he was older by Lu Yutong by about 10 years, and was in his early 30s. He was in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring tier and was definitely not someone to be underestimated. We take 90% and you guys get 10%. No disagreements, right? Huang Zitao said haughtily. If he knew that this was a stock of godly medicine, then he most probably would not be talking about this kind of division method, and instead immediately kill them off to keep them from divulging the secret and making this godly medicine his own. No disagreements, your sister. Ling Han directly gave him the middle finger. Damn! Huang Zitao and his companions were stunned for a while before finally reacting. They all brandished their respective weapons in a very aggressive manner. They had already long disliked the look of Ling Han. He was only a single person, but he had managed to obtain the hearts of both twin pearls of the imperial city. Hearing his provocative reply now, how could they hold themselves back anymore? They all brandished their respective weapons in attack and charged towards him. Bullying those who are younger than you? Don't you feel the slightest bit of shame? Ling Han snorted, his feet placed in the movements of exiting cloud steps, his sword quivering, shooting out flashes of cold light. Not all of Huang Zitao's party were powerful elites. The other three were only an element-gathering tier, and they had only dared to charge because Huang Zitao was there to hold up the lines. Ling Han thus placed his focus on these three people. The exiting cloud steps was a quick and strange movement, allowing him to dodge every single one of Huang Zitao's attacks. His sword chi danced unhindered, shooting towards the other three men. His battle prowess was enough to dominate an ordinary martial artist in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, plus he had also formed 6 flashes of sword chi, so his attack power was definitely domineering. Shwa, shwa, shwa. The torn pieces of cloth flew everywhere as if they were butterflies, and the three men suffering the brunt of his attacks shrieked. The clothing on their bodies was continuously being slashes into pieces, leaving behind one wound after another. Brat, face me directly if you dare, Huang Zitao shouted furiously. Is something wrong with your brain? Ling Han snorted. I'm only in the 6th layer of element gathering tier, yet you're in the 5th layer of gushing spring tier, and you still want me to face you directly? Have you become an idiot from too much martial arts practice? Damn! Huang Zitao once again cursed, and shouted loudly, Step back, all of you. These three people were not able to help him. On the contrary, they were hindering him, making him unable to fully use his abilities. They were even sometimes used as human shields by Ling Han, forcing him to withdraw his saber in the nick of time quite a few times. After the other three had stepped back as per his command, Huang Zitao waved his saber, and indeed the area of effect of his attacks expanded. The light of the saber was bitingly cold, and like pouring water, surrounded Ling Han completely. In such a situation, he was indeed very much at the advantage, suppressing Ling Han to the point that he was unable to fight back in any way at all and could only dodge to the best of his abilities. Yet Lu Yutong did not fling out any attacks of her own. Instead, she took advantage of the opportunity to continue to advance nearer to that stalk of godly medicine. This was the plan that Ling Han had decided on from the start. He would be the one in charge of detaining Huang Zitao, while Lu Yutong would be responsible for plucking the medicinal herb. As long as Huang Zitao was unable to free himself to stop her, then how could a few martial artists of mere element-gathering tier be able to match Lu Yutong? Oh no! None of the three were idiots, so they very quickly discovered Lu Yutong's movements. They hurriedly pounced, intending to stop her. However, they had moved a little too late, and added with the fact that all three were only in element-gathering tier, how could they manage to catch up to her? Lu Yutong moved without turning up any dust, quickly making her way to that stalk of godly medicine. Just when she saw that she was only about 10 meters away from her target, shwa! A flash of sword chi swept towards her, forcing her to stop her advance. A white-robed young man wielding a sword approached them. His face was like crowning jade and he had black hair. Every step he took was as if he was performing some kind of amazing rhythm of nature, inadvertently attracting the eyes of everyone in the area, becoming the target of everyone's attention. Sun Bu Ren. Lu Yutong's eyes narrowed a bit, revealing an expression of deep dread. Sun Bu Ren, the most outstanding clansman of this generation of the Sun Clan. Though he was not one of the core disciples of the Huyang Academy, he was still among the 10 strongest true disciples, having the ability to break into the ranks of the core disciples. His name was originally Sun Rin, Yet he later changed his name to Sun Bu Ren. Apparently, he has always admired the merciless character of Xiao Xiong, and the way he would use all ends to achieve his means. Thus, the name Sun Bu Ren was born. Third layer of gushing spring tier with unfathomable depths to his battle prowess. He should be at least able to reach 5 stars. Yu Tong girl, could you yield this treasured herb to me? How about it? Sun Bu Ren wore a smile on his face, as warm as a gust of wind in spring. Yet those who were familiar with him knew very well that this person was a fickle character. In one instant he could be all smiles, but in the next, his face could change completely as he made a move to kill you. I don't agree with that. A light laughter was heard, and another person appeared. This newcomer was quite tall, with a handsome appearance, and in terms of aura, was not beneath Sun Bu Ren. Hu Fengyu. Sun Bu Ren's expression tensed. Hu Fengyu was also one of the 10 strongest true disciples of Hu Yang Academy. Me neither. Another young elite appeared, yet this one was a little fatty. His figure was as round as a wine barrel, yet his appearance caused both Hu Fengyu and Sun Bu Ren to frown. Qian Wu Yong, also one of the 10 strongest true disciples. All right then. The area was quite empty just now. Yet in a few moments so many elite martial artists have appeared. Ling Han and Huang Zitao naturally both ceased fighting. There were too many elite martial artists here, and whoever made the first move was definitely an idiot. Hehe. None of you want to make a move? Then this spiritual medicine will belong to me. Qian Wu Yong shot forward. Though he was exceptionally plump, he was also exceptionally fast, and within moments he had reached the stalk of godly medicine. Insolence! Sun Bu Ren, Hu Fengyu, and Huang Zitao all acted at the same time. Saber Qi and Sword Qi flew forward in unison, creating a terrifying sight. Qian Wu Yong could not help but turn over in midair to dodge the attacks of these 3 people. Even he would not dare to clash head-on with the united attacks of 3 such elite warriors. However, the deadlock was broken, and the 4 of them attacked each other. They would be stopping each other from snatching away the treasured herb, while also trying their best to first get their hands on the treasured herb. All of a sudden, the scene was in a complete mess. Ling Han did not move. Instead, he simply stood at one side. When the victor was finally decided, he would only need to just take out his treasured saber to snatch back the godly medicine. Huang Zitao and the other 3 had been worried at first that the shock waves from their battle would be too powerful and damage that stalk of treasured herb. But after their battle had gone on for a while, they realized that all the energy of their attacks would be blocked from advancing further by the light surrounding the herb once it reached it. The shock wave was unable to spread any farther than that. Now they were even bolder, and their movements were even more without care. Sabers and swords flashed as origin power gushed forth. As Ling Han watched, he gave a light nod. Aside from Huang Zitao, all the other 3 were extremely powerful. If it was not for the fact that Huang Zitao had the advantage in terms of cultivation level, he would have been forced out of the battle by the other 3 long ago. Even so, Huang Zitao was the weakest one of the bunch. There was not much difference whether he was there or not. Sun Bu Ren managed to form 3 flashes of Sword Qi, while Hu Fengyu had 3 flashes of Saber Qi. The little fatty used claws, and similarly had 3 flashes of Qi. The 3 of them could be said to be evenly matched, and it was difficult to decide who was the stronger one. They are all among the 10 strongest true disciples of the Academy. As for the question about who is stronger, none of them have revealed their true prowess before, so there is no basis for judgment. Lu Yutong whispered to Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Within 3 months, you will definitely be able to surpass them." If these words were heard by someone else, they'd definitely laugh themselves half to death. One has to know that the reputations of Hu Fengyu and the other 2 in Hu Yang Academy have all come from the many battles they have fought. They had also spent quite a few years before finally managing to attain the positions they had today. How could they simply be surpassed as easily as that? Yet Lu Yutong was absolutely confident. Her talent was real, plus she was cultivating a heaven-grade cultivation technique and using the alchemical medicines that Ling Han had concocted. There was also the black-grade high-level martial arts technique that she was learning. All these factors added together would definitely allow her to be completely transformed into a new person in 3 months' time. The battle between the 4 gushing spring-tier martial artists was growing fiercer and more violent, inciting flames of rage from all 4 of them. Seeing that the deadlock was unable to be broken, they all made a move to snatch the stalk of godly medicine, obviously intending to get some benefits first. Fuck! Ling Han cursed. He hurriedly drew the saber and rushed forward. This was a godly medicine. How could he allow it to be damaged? But it was at this very moment that something no one expected happened. The stalk of godly medicine actually removed itself from the ground, slipped, and as if its roots were its legs, pa pa, pa. It turned a cartwheel on the ground and had broken through the siege of the 4 of them in an instant. It began racing away at a very fast pace. Fuck! What the? A medicinal herb actually uprooted itself and was now racing off? When they witnessed such a scene, everyone was stunned for a moment before finally coming back to themselves and swiftly chasing after the runaway herb. Not even Ling Han had foreseen that something like this would happen. Even if Huang Zitao and the others did not know the origins of this godly medicine, if a herb could actually uproot itself and run away, then with their intelligence, how could they not deduce that the value of this medicinal herb was far, far above what they had imagined? A godly medicinal herb was running in front, while a large group of people was chasing after it. This scene was a bit funny, but no one had the intention to laugh at this moment. They had all put their focus into running, trying to grab hold of the runaway herb. In myths, there were some treasures that had developed consciousness. They could travel underground and fly through the air, and this herb, though it was not traveling underground or flying through the air, since it was able to run around like a human being, its value should not be low. As they ran, the commotion attracted more and more people to join in the ranks of chasers. Ling Han discovered that this stalk of godly medicine was definitely doing this on purpose, because it kept continuously running around in circles, attracting more and more people to chase after it. Yet it was always in control of maintaining a proper distance, obviously being very skilled at this kind of game. Could a stalk of godly medicine actually develop its own intelligence? When he thought this, Ling Han could not help becoming overwhelmed with shock. A thing like intelligence belonged to human beings and demonic beasts, and some demonic beasts may even have intelligence equal to a human being's, yet he had never heard that plants could have intelligence as well. With the deliberate leading of this stalk of godly medicine, out of the people who have entered this space, at least 3/4 had joined in the race after the godly medicinal herb. However, not one of them managed to catch up to it. They all could only run after its heels and eat dust. "We can't go on like this," someone proclaimed. "Why do I feel like I've been played with by a stalk of spiritual medicine? Although this isn't outrageous, but this is what I think. This stalk of godly medicine is evil. Hee, if you think it's evil, you can give up. No one's forcing you to run after it. But I'm curious." No one was willing to give up. Now, even idiots should be able to guess that this stalk of godly medicine was unbelievably valuable. There were even some people who had deliberately left to inform those old monsters to have them set up a trap outside so that this stalk of spiritual medicine would not suddenly run off through the underground river and then disappear completely. "Hear my command. Everyone move separately and combine forces to catch this stalk of spiritual medicine," the 3rd Imperial Prince said. "Now, the higher ranks have been alerted. According to them, we must apprehend this stalk of spiritual medicine at all costs. So please do not harbor any selfish motives, all of you." Everyone nodded. Since even the higher ranks outside the opening have been alerted, how could they dare to disobey? It was most appropriate for the 3rd Imperial Prince to take command. Firstly, because he was strong enough, and secondly, because his status was high enough. As one command after another was announced, none dared to disobey. Even Hu Fengyu, Sun Buren, and the others obeyed his commands strictly. On the surface, at least, there was no disagreement from them. However, Ling Han could deduce that these young men were mostly filled with great ambition. How could they simply give up when such a valuable godly medicine was right in front of their eyes? They were all definitely filled with their own motives. Once they managed to get their hands on it, they would immediately swallow it. Who knows, maybe they would experience a dramatic transformation, and in a single step become a god. The circle of people widened, and the stock of godly medicine kept running into danger in all directions. However, no one had guessed that the godly medicine had not been displaying its full speed at all. It was only now that it was surrounded by danger on all sides that it suddenly showed off a burst of speed, and became as quick as lightning. Once it broke through their siege, the stalk of godly medicine actually raised its roots in their direction, like a human raising his finger. When they thought about it, the finger it was raising was definitely the middle finger. Awesome, this wasn't just a stalk of godly medicine, it was also a stalk of godly medicine with the character of a ruffian. There was a strange feeling arising in all of them. They had actually been played by a stalk of spiritual medicine. I'm so angry. I will definitely eat you. One of them, with an impatient character, shouted loudly in his anger. The circle of people was once again in place and gradually shrank in size, leaving less and less space for the stalk of godly medicine to run around in. Ling Han frowned. With the huge commotion that this stalk of godly medicine has stirred up, even if he was able to dominate over everyone here, would he be able to get this stalk of godly medicine undamaged? If he ate it in front of the eyes of everyone here, then who knows if he'd be made into human soup by the old monsters waiting outside once he exited this place. That was really something that the old monsters would do, because most godly medicines had the ability to extend one's lifespan, and what do those old monsters lack the most? Time and life. He could not help feeling troubled. What could he do now that would allow him to make this stalk of godly medicine his own without alerting anyone else to the fact? He had the spatial ring, so there was absolutely no problem for him to conceal it without any trace. But the problem was, how could he acquire the godly medicine without letting anyone else find out? As he continued to run, he continued to ponder this problem. The godly medicine was now forced into a corner. After all, there were too many people here, so no matter how fast it was completely useless. Ling Han stopped abruptly and gasped, "Danger!" Lu Yutong and Li Sichan did not have the slightest doubt about his words, so they immediately stopped, but the others all snorted at him. This brat must be trying to fool them. They have already entered this place for quite a long time. When had they encountered with any kind of danger here? Although this was the belly of the mountain, there was always light flickering all around them, allowing their environment to be without a single hint of darkness. Yet in front of them appeared a dark space, as if it was a gigantic maw of a monster waiting to swallow them. Xiao. The godly medicine had already run in, and everyone else was right at its heels. But all of a sudden, pong, 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 pong. It was as if they had ran into an invisible wall, and they were immediately bounced back. Some of them were still fine, only coming out with bleeding wounds. Yet there were others who had been seriously injured, and some of their bones were poking out of their skin. The godly medicine stopped, and once again used its roots to signal at them, provoking them. There was no one angry this time, though, because they all came off quite horribly from the crash, and had not yet regained their breaths. Bastard! One of them immediately raced to Ling Han, and used his finger to point at Ling Han's nose. Since you know there was danger ahead, why didn't you say so early on? Can you be a bit reasonable? Lu Yutong put herself in front of Ling Han, a baleful look on her face. Didn't Ling Han already tell you there was danger ahead? You all were the ones that didn't stop running. Hang, you didn't say so clearly? Who knows what that danger is? Someone argued illogically, saying loudly, Ling Han, if you're a man, then step out here. Don't let a woman defend you. This person was in the 8th layer of element gathering tier, and so naturally was completely no match against Lu Yutong. But Ling Han was only in the 6th layer of element gathering tier, making him think that Ling Han was an easy target. Sigh. Ugly people do everything to attract attention. Ling Han lightly pushed Lu Yutong to one side. Lu Yutong could not help feeling a bit worried. She was naturally not worried that Ling Han would get hurt, but rather was worried that this guy had too quick a temper, and would kill off this guy that was deliberately provoking him. In that case, it wouldn't be easy to settle things. Don't worry. For the sake of Miss Lu, I will be merciful. The person laughed coldly. The reason why he had deliberately provoked Ling Han was only to make him suffer a bit, so that Ling Han's image in Lu Yutong's eyes would be ruined. Pa! He had just finished talking, and his face had suffered a heavy slap. He could feel a burning pain on his cheek. He stared blankly for a moment, before realizing that he had been slapped by Ling Han. Instantly, he flew into a rage, and similarly raised his palm, striking towards Ling Han. Pa! Ling Han's palm once again rose and struck his face. He had moved later yet had hit his target first and once again gave him a slap. Moreover, the force of the blow was exceptionally strong, causing the man's figure to sway. The palm that he had raised naturally did not hit anything. He could not believe this reality, and so once again aimed a slap at Ling Han. Pa 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 pa. He was really unlucky this time, as Ling Han slapped his face repeatedly. Anyone else not convinced? Ling Han stopped moving and smiled at the others. Everyone else shook their heads. This guy was really too fierce. Anyone who was not in Gushing Spring tier was completely unqualified to come to blows with Ling Han. The few Gushing Spring tier martial artists gave a humph. They had no fear of Ling Han, yet they dreaded facing Lu Yutong. Currently, Lu Yutong had her sword in hand and was standing guard by Ling Han's side, so no one dared to make any reckless moves. Most importantly, they did not have the time to bother with Ling Han right now. That stalk of spiritual medicine had escaped into the mysterious zone, so the most important thing now was how they were going to tempt it out of there. More and more people poured out to surround this area on all sides. This was probably the central zone of the whole underground space. It was circular in shape and occupied quite a large area. Most importantly, that dark area seemed to be swallowing all of the surrounding light as if it was a solid object, capable of blocking their sight. A person standing at one end would not be able to see the other end at all. Thankfully, there were enough people who had entered here and could somewhat ensure that this area was completely surrounded. At least, if that stalk of godly medicine ventured out, they would know instantly. What now? After they had formed a circle around the dark area, everyone asked awkwardly, "Make sure it's trapped. I don't believe it's never coming back out." Someone said, "Are you stupid? That is a plant. It can completely dig its roots inside for a few years to a few hundred years. But what about us? We would have to leave after 3 days at most." Another person rebuked. "Oh, right," the person who had spoken earlier said with a bit of embarrassment. Everyone was frowning in thought. That was definitely a stalk of spiritual medicine and may have even reached the legendary godly level, yet they could only stand here and watch. This feeling was really about to drive them crazy. Some of them left to inform the old monsters waiting outside the opening, hoping that they could have some idea about what to do, while the others continued to stand guard here. Ling Han slowly neared that invisible wall. He stretched out a hand to feel it, a very familiar feeling. A sliver of a smile turned up the corners of Ling Han's lips. Years ago, he had ventured to a lot of ancient historical sites and had witnessed a lot of similar situations. That was also why he had shouted out the warning earlier on. This was not a wall but an aura field that was at a level above heaven tier. If he was still in heaven tier, then based on the studies he had done on this kind of aura field, he could break through it by force and allow himself to pass through, but now, he was completely unqualified to attempt that kind of thing. Could it be that he would have to use that? Ling Han took out the damaged saber. This was his disciple's treasured saber, and could also possibly be the only remnant of his disciple that he would be able to find. If he used all the remaining might of the spiritual tool in a single explosive burst, he should be able to forcibly use the power on par with heaven tier. But the problem was, such an explosive burst would also mean the complete end of this treasured saber. Ling Han hesitated. Moreover, there was another problem. This treasured saber could only explode with such power once, so after he entered, how was he going to get back out? But after a short moment, he finally made his decision. He had to go in, because there was not only the godly medicine inside. The secret behind that great battle years ago should also be hidden there, and he wanted to find out the reason for that battle. Moreover, if there was really the corpse of an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier inside that had formed this aura field, then who knows, he may have a way to disperse this aura field. "You two, cover for me," Ling Han said to Lu Yutong and Li Sichuan. As this area was very big, Everyone was standing about 10 meters apart from each other to completely surround this area. Thus, Ling Han was standing in between the two girls. It would not be very easy for the people standing at the other side of the two girls to notice him there if they weren't paying attention. The two girls did not know what he intended to do, but they both nodded, because they knew that this guy had the ability to achieve the impossible. Ling Han began to revive the treasured saber. Zhang Yufeng's martial intent originated from him, and though he was extremely weak at the moment, their martial arts were of the same vein. With the stimulation of his divine sense, the martial intent engraved in the treasured saber began to awaken. Wang. The seals on the treasured saber began to light up one by one, shining brightly. However, this was the last light that would be coming from it. Soon, it would become completely ordinary like any other normal weapon. Ling Han did not have the slightest bit of hesitation. He used the treasured saber to pierce through the aura field to open up a path for himself. Even so, he was still in a very emotionally tense state. The treasured saber in his hand was shaking as if it was a fish out of water, and even his body was shaking along with it from the force of its quivering, so much that he was forced to walk in a zigzag pattern. His figure instantly disappeared into that dark area, and could no longer be seen. Lu Yutong and Li Sichan were both dumbstruck with shock. They exchanged a look with each other, and in the other's eyes, they could both see deep astonishment, as well as strong admiration. Was there anything that this youth, no, this man, could not do? They quickly withdrew their gazes and became alert, focusing on the task of covering for Ling Han to ensure that no one would notice that he had disappeared. Otherwise, even if Ling Han did manage to get any treasure, based on his current ability, he would not be able to keep it. Sweat covered Ling Han's whole body. There was danger everywhere in this aura field. Years ago, when he was still in Heaven Tier, a single wrong step would mean severe injury for him, and with his current cultivation level of only the 6th layer of Element Gathering Tier now, this was practically trying to pull chestnuts out of a roaring fire. Any slightest bit of mistake could cost his life, and there were definitely no second chances. Yet this made him even more excited. He was completely focused, and his eyes were extremely bright. There was usually not much difference between a genius and a maniac. In his last life, he had put his focus on alchemy. Once he began to concoct alchemical pills, it would be as if he had transformed into a maniac, and this life, he had put his focus on martial arts, and so similarly also had one part of him that was a maniac, though he had not had a chance to display this part of him before. This kind of situation where danger was surrounding him on all sides caused his whole body to shiver, yet also made him even more excited. To be wavering between the boundaries of life and death allowed him to deeply feel the significance of life, and his divine sense was surging like oceanic waters. He even had a kind of feeling that perhaps this kind of dangerous place was the only way to train one's divine sense. The light from the treasured saber began to flicker, and Ling Han experienced a shock. The damage to this treasured saber was far worse than he had imagined. It had only withstood such a short while, and it looked like it was about to go out. Although he enjoyed taking risks, but taking risks and going straight to his death were two different things. He hurriedly sped up. As he had to calculate the changes within the aura field, his mind was extremely focused, and his mental energy was being expended at a very fast rate. The sweat covering his whole body was dripping down like water, and in a few short moments, had dampened all his clothes and even left behind traces of water underneath his steps. Yet it was as if he did not feel anything. His eyes were bright, and he continued to advance. Wang. The treasured saber gave a final flicker, and the light from all the seals vanished all at once, the seals shattering. This meant that the martial intent inside the treasured saber had been completely wiped out. Who? Ling Han took a leap and charged out with a loud breath. He had finally managed to make his was out of the area that had been sealed in by the aura field. Light had again appeared in front of him. This was an area that was only about 100 feet in size. In the center, there was a corpse that was sitting in a cross-legged position on the ground, and that stalk of godly medicine was currently working hard on rooting itself into the ground. However, it seemed like the ground here was especially hard. Such a long time had passed, yet the stalk of godly medicine had only managed to insert half of its roots into the ground. Ling Han's eyes lit up, and he quietly approached the stalk of godly medicine. He did not know if there was a back and face to the godly medicine, but it was obvious that the stalk of godly medicine had not yet noticed that he was there. 10 steps, 8 steps, 5 steps, 3 steps. Ling Han suddenly leaped out and stretched out a hand to grab that stalk of godly medicine. The godly medicine was doing its best to dig its roots into the ground, and had not thought that anyone would have been able to suddenly break into the area sealed off by the aura field. Thus, it was completely caught unprepared by Ling Han, quickly pulling its roots out of the ground, ready to race off again. But this time, it was one step too late, though its movements were indeed very quick, and it had already removed its roots from the ground. Ling Han's hand also managed to grab onto its roots. The godly medicine looked like it had experienced a huge fright. Even the flower that was blooming had instantly withdrawn all its petals, and even the stem was twisted and bent. But in the next instant, it suddenly started to struggle fiercely, and it actually flew out of his grasp. Shio! It scrambled into the area sealed off by the aura field, and in mere moments, had completely disappeared within the darkness. Ling Han was astounded. When he uncurled his fist and took a look, there were 3 torn-off roots left in his grip. There was a milky white liquid dripping from the torn-off ends of the roots, and all of a sudden, an indescribable refreshing fragrance filled the air, making his whole body relax. It was as if he was about to become as light as a feather and ascend to heaven. This was the godly medicine. How could Ling Han dare to waste it? He quickly stuck out his tongue to suck and lick clean that milky white liquid. Any single drop wasted would be an unforgivable sin. It's invigorating. So damn invigorating. Just a whiff of this godly medicine was enough to make him feel light as a feather and ready to ascend to heaven. Swallowing the several drops of liquid made this feeling even stronger, as if all the pores of his body were completely open and spiritual chi was automatically gushing in, nurturing his entire body. It was a feeling too amazing for mere words. His divine sense in particular had been greatly augmented, and his blood, flesh, nerves, and bones had all obtained a similar upgrade. His cultivation level, on the other hand, had increased the least. The value of the godly medicine is not in upgrading one's cultivation level, Ling Han thought. He expanded his divine sense and closely observed the changes taking place within his body. Vitality. This was the conclusion that he had come to. With the nurturing effects of the godly medicine, his body and its vitality had obtained a great upgrade. Any martial artist would know that a human being had a mere lifespan of about 100 years. Only if one managed to break through to Flower Blossom tier would they be able to break the restrictions of being mortal and gain another 200 years of life. Otherwise, even if they ate some kind of 1,000-year ginseng, it would only aid them in slowing down their aging process at most, and thus allow one to live for another few years. Why could a Flower Blossom tier martial artist obtain another 200 years of life? That was because the vitality within his body had been strengthened. After Flower Blossom tier, every breakthrough to a new tier would mean a new transformation, continuing to gain more and more life and vitality, and continuously increasing one's lifespan. Most importantly, there was a lapse after Heaven tier. Since a Heaven tier martial artist could reach Shattering Void tier, then the longest lifespan of a martial artist was limited to 1,000 years. A godly medicine could achieve the same kind of effect. He had just swallowed a few drops of the godly fluid, and Ling Han's life and vitality had obtained a great upgrade. As someone who had once been a powerful warrior of Heaven tier, he could make a rough estimate. He had roughly gained an extra 20 years of life. 20 years. Just a few drops. If he had managed to swallow the whole stalk of godly medicine, how many extra years of life would he have been able to get? 1,000 years, that was the lowest estimate. That was equivalent to a powerful warrior of Heaven tier getting another lifetime to live, and for mortals that would be another 10 lifetimes. What was the most valuable thing in this world? It was not cultivation technique, martial arts technique, or wealth. It was life. That was another extra 1,000 years of life. This would be enough to drive powerful martial artists of Heaven tier crazy. Ling Han stored the 3 roots of the godly medicine into the spatial ring. Increasing lifespan was one of the effects of the godly medicine, and naturally was the greatest effect, But there were other uses for it: to reform the physical body, and thoroughly clear away the impurities accumulated in one's body. He had a heaven-grade spirit base, but this did not mean that his body was also heaven-grade. On the other hand, he had a very normal body. However, after he had began cultivating the invincible heaven scroll, his physical body had ascended to the level of body of dead tree, and he was able to match those races with special constitution. In other words, his body was still very far from the level of perfection. At least, there were still 3 different levels ahead of him: body of rock cliff, body of iron sheet, and body of diamond. Moreover, this was only the first level of the invincible heaven scroll. Godly medicine can help one to improve one's physical body. Who knows? I may be able to use it to achieve body of rock cliff. Ling Han's eyes lit up. If he managed to learn body of rock cliff, not only would his defenses be even stronger than before, he would also be able to condense another 2 drops of indestructible true fluid. He would then have altogether 3 drops, so he would have even more trump cards in hand. It's too bad. If I had an intact stock of godly medicine, I may be able to soar right up to body of iron sheet, or possibly even body of diamond. He could not help feeling very regretful, but he soon laughed in spite of himself. Then he said to himself, "A man can't be too greedy. In my last life I did not see even a level 9 treasure, and now, at the mere level of the 6th layer of element gathering tier, I not only saw a level 10 godly medicine, I have even obtained 3 of its roots. If I am still unsatisfied with this, then I really deserve to be struck by lightning." He cast his eyes at that corpse sitting in the center. He had a feeling that this was the source of everything. This corpse had obviously experienced a great battle. At least more than 100 of his bones had been shattered. It was very hard to imagine how he could have managed to continue fighting when he had had so many of his bones broken. Ling Han slowly approached and took a closer look at it, and could not help becoming astonished. There were actually multiple golden characters on these bones. However, perhaps too much time had passed, or perhaps this person was too heavily injured, for these characters have all practically dimmed. However, this did not hinder Ling Han from feeling the might of these golden characters. Rather than saying these were written characters, it would be more appropriate to say they were part of a design that illustrated the powers of nature, and used these characters as a method of displaying them. Wait! Ling Han startled. The invincible heaven scroll is also like this, because I have no way to use mere words to recite it out. He came to a sudden understanding. No wonder he had needed 10,000 years just to comprehend the first level of cultivation technique. That was because it had far surpassed the level of mere words, and had reached a whole new level. However, although I have only taken one look, I can confirm that these golden characters on the bones are no match for the invincible heaven scroll. The complexity level of the 2 were completely different. But I can definitely conclude that this is the corpse of a powerful warrior of shattering void tier. If I am able to pry apart even a single shred of his martial intent, it would definitely be very beneficial to me when I break through to shattering void tier in the future, Ling Han said to himself. He widened his eyes, intending to memorize these golden characters. Hong! A red flame suddenly gushed out of the skeleton. It was dazzlingly bright, and there was a wave of heat that surged from it, causing Ling Han to take a few steps back. A red-colored flame floated above the skeleton, and formed into various shapes, as if it had its own life. A strange fire! Ling Han gasped out in surprise. Strange fire was a very strange substance born from nature. It could also be described as a type of energy, and it was indescribably valuable to martial artists and alchemists alike, for once a martial artist refined the strange fire, he could refine his own physical body, raise his cultivation level, or even develop some fire-type martial arts technique. And if an alchemist fused with the strange fire, he would get a great advantage when concocting alchemical pills. Why? Because the most important thing in concocting alchemical pills was fire control. However, a martial artist had limited power, so the heat of the flames one could produce was extremely limited. But the strange fire could increase this limit by a considerable number of times and allow an alchemist to gain much more room to exercise his abilities. For example, for Ling Han, based on his ability, he could concoct alchemical pills as high as heaven grade. However, due to the limitations of his cultivation level, He could not do so because he was unable to produce flames with such a high level of heat to heat his alchemy furnace. But, if he were to fuse with a strange fire, then while concocting heaven-grade alchemical pills would still be impossible, there was a great possibility that he would be able to concoct earth-grade alchemical pills. Even if it was not possible for him now, by the time he broke through to Gushing Spring Tier, he should be about able to. Instantly, his eyes lit up. Ling Han's only feeling now was that his luck in this life was unbelievably, illogically great. In his last life, although he was an ultimate warrior of heaven tier, whether it was the godly medicine or the strange fire, he had not even managed to see either of them. But in this life, he was only in the 6th layer of element gathering tier, and he has already seen both these extremely rare items, and had even managed to obtain 3 roots of the godly medicine. If he could also manage to make this strange fire his own. Ling Han's heartbeat sped up in spite of himself. The strange fire could allow him to concoct alchemical pills of a higher grade than he could at his current cultivation level. The extremely high heat of the strange fire could also become one of the hidden cards up his sleeve. He was a bit curious now. How did this strange fire come to be? One has to know that there are many types of strange fires, but there was a need to meet certain requirements for each type to form. The most common type of strange fire was of course those born in the depths of a volcano, but there were also some special types of strange fires that were born within cold places, or even within freezing ice. These were known as flames of ice, and they had the ability to freeze living things to death. But what about this place? Ling Han could not think of any conditions here that would induce the birth of a strange fire, aside from this corpse in front of him. This corpse had been an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void Tier when he was alive. Could it be that an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void Tier was even able to form strange fires? Ling Han pondered in his thoughts, though his eyes were still fixed upon that strange fire wavering in front of him, thinking of how he might be able to make the strange fire his own. If he still had the cultivation level of heaven tier, then there would naturally be no problem. He would only need to dominate it by force. But with his current cultivation level of the 6th layer of element gathering tier, if he dared to attempt to take it by force, the most likely scenario would be being burnt to ashes. Little fire, come, come, come. You'll stay with me from now on. Ling Han acted like he was calling over a little puppy. The strange fire continued to morph into various shapes, and ignored him completely. That was natural. How could the strange fire be able to understand human language? Ling Han gritted his teeth. If he used divine sense, he would be able to skip over using mere words to communicate with the strange fire, but the problem was, did he dare to use his divine sense to come into contact with that strange fire? The might of the strange fire was more than enough to completely burn his divine sense to ashes. At least, the first level of cultivation technique of the Invincible Heaven Scroll did not include a method to heal one's divine sense. But, to just give up the strange fire like this was not something he could do. He thought furiously, and suddenly came up with an idea. Could he ask the Black Tower for help? He had a feeling that the level of the Black Tower was above even this ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier, so it should be able to dominate over the strange fire. The problem was that although the Black Tower was currently staying in his body, it definitely had the character of a boss, and usually more or less ignored him. Would it actually help him? Let's give it a try. He used his divine sense to move the Black Tower, yet Master Black was completely unmoved, and ignored him. Ling Han was not the slightest bit discouraged, and continued to use his divine sense to harass the Black Tower. He had already witnessed it once before. The Black Tower was not an inanimate object. Finally, the Black Tower gave a light quiver and emitted a shock wave. He did not feel anything from this shock wave, but there appeared even more shattered seals on the bones of the corpse, completely unable to withstand the shock wave from the Black Tower. The strange fire looked like it was a little girl that had received a huge fright, suddenly shrank into itself, and was trembling. Ling Han's heart moved, and beckoned the strange fire over. A surprising scene happened. The strange fire actually leaped into his hand. What was even more surprising was the fact that Ling Han did not feel any bit of scalding heat on his hand. The strange fire indeed had its own spirit. Ling Han bravely communicated with the strange fire, using his divine sense to transmit his thoughts over, and said, Little guy, you stay with me from now on, and I will find even more strange fires, and let you all fuse together to finally become the most powerful flame of this world. Using divine sense to transmit ideas was a communication method that surpassed the limitations of language and race. Any existence with consciousness would be able to understand. Yeah. The strange fire transmitted a blurry thought, like it was an infant just learning how to speak, so it was very indistinct. Ling Han finally understood. Though this strange fire had developed its own consciousness, its intelligence was too low, as if it was a newborn baby. Kids should be very easily duped, right? Ling Han emitted a kind aura, allowing the strange fire enough time to think things through. In truth, he was not lying. In the future, if he encountered a strange fire again, he would definitely make a move and continue to fuse the strange fires he managed to obtain together, increasing the might of the strange fire. In this world, all living creatures have an instinctive desire to become stronger and closer to perfection. The strange fire was no exception. It was unable to cultivate, but it was able to fuse with other strange fires to increase its own intelligence and might. Ling Han did not rush things, and continued to communicate with the strange fire. He had the confidence that the strange fire would eventually agree, because the Black Tower had just displayed its might, allowing the strange fire to feel that he was a man with power. A talented person would choose a good master to serve, as the saying goes. The intelligence of the strange fire was still at a simple level, and could be described as extremely innocent. Thus, if there was a need for it to choose a master, then the first thing it would consider would be the strength of its master. It was all right even if Ling Han's cultivation level wasn't very high, as long as the Black Tower was awesome enough. Yeah. The strange fire transmitted blurry thoughts and all of a sudden disappeared into Ling Han's palm, and like a drop of water sinking into sand, it was immediately absorbed and entered Ling Han's body. Ling Han had never obtained a strange fire before, but in his last life, he had managed to acquire the correct method on how to refine and absorb it, and so was not unfamiliar with the next step. Now that the strange fire was in his body, he had two choices. The first choice was to refine the strange fire and erase its intelligence, transforming it into pure energy to nurture and strengthen himself. The second was to fuse with the strange fire and preserve its intelligence, something like making his body the new residence of the strange fire. For a martial artist, they would definitely choose the first option without any bit of hesitation. But how could Ling Han break his word, even if it was one given to a strange fire? Moreover, he still needed to concoct alchemical pills, so naturally, the best option was to preserve the strange fire intact. He fused with the strange fire, and the little guy was coiled in Ling Han's left hand, fusing with Ling Han's soul. The Black Tower lightly trembled, possessing the might to dominate over everything, allowing the process to be exceptionally smooth. After a mere half an hour, the fusion process was complete. Ling Han's eyes snapped open. He stretched open his left hand, and a raging red flame burnt upon his palm. Yet this was not something powered by his origin power, but rather came from the strange fire. Yeah. The strange fire also emitted delighted thoughts, seeming to be very pleased with Ling Han's body. Go! Ling Han waved his left hand, and the strange fire instantly left his hand. With a mental command from him, it began to continuously dance and move around on the ground. He beckoned his hand again, and the strange fire flew back to him and once again disappeared into his left hand. Ha. Now my battle prowess has gotten another upgrade. With the raging flames of the strange fire, I'd be able to kill even spiritual ocean tier martial artists. What more mere gushing spring tier? However, how to get near them is a problem. No one would be foolish enough to allow the strange fire to get near them. However, if I allow the strange fire to coil around my fists, or around the blade of my sword, then when others underestimate me due to their own carelessness, there is a real possibility I'd be able to kill them right on the spot. Hehe. Then let's just see who would be so unfortunate. Ling Han looked once more at the corpse. Due to the several shock waves emanating from the Black Tower, more and more broken seals were appearing on the bones, and the golden characters were no longer identifiable, making him feel a strong regret. That was the martial intent of a powerful warrior of shattering void tier. Forget it. Forget it. I'm being too greedy, Ling Han said. My gains this time are already indescribably colossal, and what use would the martial intent of an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier be to me now? I am able to soar smoothly all the way to heaven tier in the first place. Now the problem is, how do I get out of here? When Ling Han looked at the corpse, a speculation appeared in his heart. Years ago, Zhang Yufeng and so many other elite warriors of heaven tier were ganging up on this ultimate warrior of shattering void tier, and the final result should be that neither side won and everyone died. However, the ultimate warrior of shattering void tier was too powerful. Even after his death, he managed to create a forbidden zone that no one could enter. After 10,000 years, even the martial intent of a shattering void tier martial artist would weaken, and in a sudden earthquake that revealed the underground river, various spiritual tools floated out on the waters of this underground river, and finally managed to tempt him to this place. Ling Han did not know who this ultimate warrior of shattering void tier had been when he was alive, but he fully trusted his disciple. Since Zhang Yufeng took part in this battle royale, then this ultimate warrior of shattering void tier must have committed heinous crimes. If he wanted to leave this place, it was simple, because the source of all the restrictions in this place was the martial intent of this ultimate warrior of shattering void tier. Then as long as he managed to erase this person's martial intent, then everything in this place would naturally return to how it used to be. For others, erasing the martial intent of an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier was absolutely impossible. However, for Ling Han, this would only be a slight effort on his part. After all, the source of the martial intent was the skeletal corpse, and now that this skeleton was about to collapse, he would be able to turn it completely into dust as long as he exerted a bit of effort. Under normal conditions, Ling Han would naturally not do something like destroying someone else's remains, but this guy was very possibly a man that was wicked beyond redemption. Ling Han did not hesitate for a moment and delivered a single kick. Pa! The skeleton that was already fractured in many places in the first place instantly collapsed, and all the golden characters carved on it transformed into an invisible energy that surged out in all directions. Changes were immediately obvious. At first, Ling Han was not able to see anything outside the aura field, but now that the martial intent of the shattering void tier warrior was completely gone, the aura field had also vanished without a trace. Thus, his sight was no longer hampered in any way. Ling Han, Lu Yutong and Li Xichan cried out in surprise at the same time. Ling Han's eyes cast a look around, yet found that only the two of them were there. There was no sign of any of the others. He was stunned at first, but then swiftly understood. The godly medicine had ran out earlier on, and so must have attracted a lot of people to chase after it. Thus, there was naturally no one else here. I've made you wait. He nodded at the two girls. The two girls gave a reserved smile in response. In truth, the two of them had been very worried about him before, but they did not have such thick skin to so openly display their anxiety. Let's go. The three of them went back the way they came, yet they had only walked for a short while before feeling a very powerful aura press down on them. Li Zhongyi and the other old monsters had appeared. The remains of the ultimate warrior of shattering void tier had been destroyed, so the light of God had also disappeared. There was nothing left to deny these old monsters entry. These old monsters swiftly passed them by. No matter how highly they thought of Ling Han, they would never think that the disappearance of the light of God had anything to do with this young man. They all had their attention focused on that stalk of godly medicine, and so of course would not have the time to waste on chit-chat with Ling Han. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. Their figures soared, and were soon very far away. Godly medicine. They had no hope of getting their hands on it. Or so Ling Han thought. That godly medicine was level 10, and though it was not very powerful by itself, the speed at which it could escape was incredible. Even if he still had the cultivation level of his last life, he would have to expend a lot of effort to capture it. The reason why he had been able to succeed in catching hold of it just now had been because there was still the aura field of the ultimate warrior of shattering void tier pressing down on it, slowing it down. Additionally, that stalk of godly medicine had also been careless, and had not expected there would be anyone who might be able to enter the aura field. There was no longer any value left in this place, so Ling Han chose to leave without any hesitation. However, there was still a few questions that were left unanswered in his heart. Why had there suddenly appeared an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier 10,000 years ago? Why had so many heaven tier elites suddenly appeared? And what unforgivable crime had the shattering void tier martial artist committed that caused him to be ganged up on by so many heaven tier martial artists, which eventually led to their mutual demise? No matter how hard he thought, he could find no answer to any of these questions. Perhaps this would remain an unanswered mystery forever. Ling Han regained his composure. This time he had managed to gain 3 treasures: a spatial ring, 3 roots of the godly medicine, and a strange fire. The spatial ring was all right, but the latter 2 treasures were items that even he in last life would covet furiously. What a colossal reward! On their way out, they naturally saw a lot of the others searching all around for the godly medicine. Ling Han did not stop at any moment, of course. He decided to return once they had made their way out of the underground river. Xiao. The 3 of them had just stepped onto the river bank, and they immediately saw that stalk of godly medicine run past them. It passed them by swiftly and instantly disappeared into the distance. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. Li Zhongyi and the other old monsters soon appeared, hot on its heels. All of them looked extremely furious. Obviously, they had been played by that stalk of godly medicine. Ling Han could not help but smile. Now that the light of God in this place had disappeared, that stalk of godly medicine had lost this natural protection, so it would of course not be staying in this place anymore. Most probably, it would never return here again. However, his guess was that this stalk of godly medicine wouldn't leave Rain Country either. When he had once again reached Heaven Tier, he could come back here to look around. Who knows, he might be able to obtain this stalk of godly medicine. After the light of God had disappeared, the level 9 spiritual tools all left the underground space at a quicker rate. There was no way to obtain those that still retained their spirit, and there was not much value in getting those without spirit. Ling Han did not want to continue staying here, so after asking the 2 girls for their opinion, the 3 of them returned to the Imperial City together. When Wusong Lin saw that Ling Han had returned so quickly, he could not help feeling very surprised. But, at the same time, he also breathed out a sigh in relief because for an old man like him, taking care of the 2 little girls was indeed a headache-inducing task. Hunyo was too wild, so he could not hand her over to be taken care of by servants. The only option left was for him to take care of her, and babysitting her for a mere few days was enough torment to cause him to lose a few pounds of weight. Ling. When Hunyo spotted Ling Han, she instantly pounced on him and hung herself from Ling Han's shoulders, her little face bearing an overjoyed grin. Ling Han could not help but laugh. It was really rare to hear this little girl not say meat. Looks like she had indeed missed him. However, he had barely completed this thought before hearing Hunyo exclaim, "Meat! Meat! Meat!" Fine, the deep-set character of a glutton was difficult to change. "Let's go eat meat." He picked Hunyo up, while his other hand held onto Ling Zixian, and left with the 2 little girls in tow. Lu Yutong naturally followed him, but Li Xichan could not be so willful. She could only reluctantly stay behind to assist Wusong Lin because Wusong Lin had just recently achieved a new level of comprehension and intended to concoct a type of black-grade high-level alchemical pill. If things went smoothly, he would attempt to concoct an earth-grade alchemical pill. The ingredients necessary for the concoction of an earth-grade alchemical pill were too expensive. Every time the furnace exploded, it meant a colossal waste of resources. Even a high-ranking person like Wusong Lin dared not begin the concoction process so easily. He needed to have a certain level of confidence that the furnace would not explode. This was also one of the reasons why there was no earth-grade alchemist in Rain Country. Due to there not being enough chances to try concocting earth-grade alchemical pills, how could it be possible that anyone would succeed in becoming an earth-grade alchemist? Of course, this was also related to the environment in Rain Country, where earth-grade ingredients were unbelievably expensive. However, in bigger places, although earth-grade ingredients were still very valuable, their value was not to the extent in Rain Country. Heaven-grade ingredients were the really priceless ingredients there. Ling Han carried Hu Niu while Lu Yutong held onto Ling Zixian's hand. The four of them went and had a great feast at a restaurant. It was all on the tab of the third imperial prince anyways, so money was no issue. After they had their fill, Lu Yutong and Ling Zixian left. They had their own accommodations. Moreover, Ling Zixian also needed to cultivate, so how could she keep clinging on to Ling Han? After Ling Han had returned to his own courtyard, he took out a root of the godly medicine and prepared to refine it. He was a little loath to part with it. Ling Han did not immediately refine it. This kind of a godly medicine had the life-saving abilities of growing flesh on bones and reviving a dead man. For him to simply refine it like this, he really felt a bit hesitant to make a move. However, this was only a moment's hesitation. He had already learnt body of dead tree, and thus had condensed a single drop of indestructible true fluid. This had the incredible effect of saving his life. Although its effects were a bit weaker when compared with the godly medicine, it had the advantage of being able to be condensed again after being used. Moreover, as long as he managed to learn the body of rock cliff of the invincible heaven scroll, he would be able to condense another 2 drops of the indestructible true fluid. There would be no more godly medicine once it was eaten, while the indestructible true fluid could be continuously condensed. It was obvious which one was more profitable. Additionally, the godly medicine could give his physical body a complete upgrade, strengthening his core and banking up his origin power. These were all solid benefits for him. Ling Han did not lack comprehension of cultivation. What he lacked was time, and the godly medicine could compensate for his lack of time very well. In this life, luck is on my side. Ling Han tossed the root of the godly medicine into his mouth. One bite, and he could feel a strong fragrance spread out in his mouth, and there was a light, airy feeling in his whole body, as if he would be flying at any moment. Invigorating! He continued to circulate the invincible heaven scroll while directing the medicinal effects to spread into every part of his body. Changes were immediately apparent. He could clearly feel his cells strengthening, his bones becoming sturdier, and the blood flowing in his veins becoming more energetic, as if there was an ultimate warrior thoroughly clearing away all the filth accumulated in his body. Very soon, a black layer of filth appeared on his body. This black layer was made up of the impurities accumulated in his body which, with the effects of the godly medicine, were now forced out of his body. Don't underestimate this. When a martial artist cultivated, that was a process of upgrading one's physical body. When he reached flower blossom tier, there would be a change in the nature of his body, casting off his mortal body and evolving into a higher level of existence. Just like a rock that, with continuous grinding and refining, slowly becomes a beautiful piece of jade. Forcing out the impurities in one's body was equivalent to refining oneself and speeding up the process of transforming into jade. This change was very slight, but the effects were extremely obvious. Ling Han could immediately feel the spiritual qi entering his body was obviously circulating faster than before. That was natural. Since the impurities in his veins have decreased, spiritual qi could flow throughout his body at a faster pace. And that was not the only benefit. Now that the circulation of spiritual qi had become faster, when he began circulating origin power in future, it would also be a faster process than before. What it meant was clear. The faster origin power was being circulated, the greater the destructive power behind his blows. This was a solid upgrade. His life and vitality were continuously becoming stronger, and there was also a certain level of upgrade to his divine sense, making him experience the feeling of having a clear head. When he pondered, his thoughts were forming at a faster pace and were clearer than before. Exhilarating, exhilarating, exhilarating. After about half a day, he had completely refined the root of the godly medicine. What a pity that there is practically no increase to my cultivation level. Ling Han sighed, but it was all right. Previously, he had taken advantage of the opportunity and embezzled the resources provided by the imperial family of Rain Country, as well as the 8 great clans to concoct a large amount of alchemical pills that could help him increase his cultivation level, so he was not missing out. He took out the second root of the godly medicine, swallowed it, and continued the refining process. Hong long long. This time, he could sense a thunderous noise within his body. as every bone was groaning and crashing one into another. This time, the effects of the medicine had gone even deeper, and it was stimulating a great change within the bones of his body. This was not so exhilarating. On the other hand, the remolding of his bones was an agonizing process, as if his whole body was being shattered to be rebuilt once more. The pain caused him to suck on his teeth, and sweat poured down like rain from his body. Ugh! Ah! He released a series of low groans. Pung, pung, pung. Very quickly, there was a banging on the door. It was Hunyou who had heard his moans of pain and had thus come to check up on him. "I'm fine," Ling Han said through gritted teeth. Pung! But it was obviously completely pointless to say this to Hunyou. The violent nature of the little girl had activated, as she crashed in. After rolling around on the ground once, she looked at Ling Han simple-mindedly. When she saw that he was still able to sit in a cross-legged position, though he had sweated a lot, she immediately bared her teeth in a grin. What a heartless little girl. Ling Han did not have the time to bother with her at the moment. The invincible heaven scroll continued to circulate and his body was still absorbing the effects of the medicine to remold the bones in his body. The agony surged continuously like oceanic waters, crashing into him so hard that he felt like he could faint at any moment. But if he actually lost consciousness, he would not be able to circulate the invincible heaven scroll anymore, so the effects of the medicine could only circulate throughout his body instinctively and without any conscious guidance from him. In that case, the effects would naturally be much weaker. Most importantly, he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to force his body all the way up to body of rock cliff. That meant that he needed to circulate the invincible heaven scroll and absorb the effects of the medicine based on the secret arts in the heaven scroll. I shall endure it. Endure it. Endure it. Endure it. Ling Han gritted his teeth. Veins were popping up on his head and his neck. There soon appeared a puddle of water on the spot he was seated at, and it seemed as if he had just been fished out of the water as both his eyes looked a bit empty. He was also eating godly medicine this time, yet why was there such disparity between the first and second time? Ling Han let his thoughts run wild to distract him from the agony he was experiencing. He thought about his father who was still in Grey Cloud Town. He also thought about Lu Yutong and Li Sichuan. He even thought about his last life. He did not know how much time had passed, but that strong feeling of agony finally began to weaken, eventually completely disappearing. Ling Han breathed out a long sigh of relief. Just now, he had even had the thought of giving up, but thankfully he had persevered. He looked down at his body. Impurities had also been forced out this time, but they were not black in color, but rather white. These were the impurities from within his bones, thoroughly clearing out the filth in body. It did live up to its name. The first portion of the godly medicine improved his body and flesh, and the second portion refined his bones. Then what about the third portion? Ling Han breathed out and took out the third portion of the godly medicine. Smells nice. Smells nice. Hunyou immediately pounced over, her eyes fixed upon the godly medicine, saliva nearly dripping out of her mouth. Little girl, you haven't begun cultivating yet, so it would be too wasteful for you to eat this. Moreover, the medicinal effects are too strong, and you'll get constipated, Ling Han said with a laugh. Eat. Hunyou grabbed Ling Han's arm and tugged repeatedly, acting like a spoiled child. No! Ling Han shook his head firmly. There was no use acting pitiful. Hunyou stretched out her little head and gave a strong struggle, aiming a bite at the godly medicine. She had struggled too strongly, and Ling Han actually lost his grip on her in a moment of carelessness. Her mouth had bitten onto the godly medicine. Oh no! If it was bitten by this glutton, then there wouldn't even be scraps left behind. Indeed, he immediately felt a little tongue licking at his hand. That was Hunyou, who had still not had enough and was gnawing at his hand like it was a chicken's leg. This prodigal child. Ling Han sighed. That was godly medicine, and he had in total only obtained 3 portions, yet 1 portion was actually wasted on this little girl. She 11. Hunyou turned back around and gave him a large grin. When Ling Han saw this, he couldn't manage to get angry even if he wanted to. Who asked him to cry out so horribly just now and alert this little girl? When it came down to it, the little girl had barged in because she had been worried about him after all. Forget it. Hopefully, you can withstand such powerful medicinal effects. Ling Han sighed and carried the little girl out. He was in desperate need of a bath. There was filth covering his whole body, so much that he felt horrible just from smelling it. After taking a bath, Ling Han took a look inside his body and revealed a satisfied smile when he saw the results. His body had obtained a great upgrade this time round. Though he had yet to reach the level of body of rock cliff, his bones had become as strong as steel, and his skin had become tougher too. It should not be too far to go before he reached body of rock cliff. Most importantly, there was a huge upgrade to his life and vitality. He only felt full of energy, and so no matter what he did, he felt full of enthusiasm. The next morning, Ling Han vaguely felt that something was a bit off. When he thought things over, he finally realized something. Hunyou had not awakened yet. Usually, by this time, the little girl would be awake, clinging to him and yelling out her meat, meat, meat. A glutton actually forgot to eat. That was equivalent to the possibility of the sun rising from the west. Ling Han's first thought was that there was definitely something off with the little girl. Something must have happened. She had just eaten a portion of the godly medicine yesterday, and based on her current cultivation level of mere body refining tier, such a nutritious kind of medicine must have been too powerful for her. Ling Han went to the little girl's room. At first, she slept beside Ling Han, but according to Lu Yutong, even if Hunyou was still very small, she was still a girl, so she had cleaned up a room for her. When he entered the room and his eyes swept over it, he instantly got a shock, because there was absolutely no sign of the little girl. Instead of a little girl, there was an egg on the bed. That's right. It was an egg, and it was an extremely big one too. It was wide enough to fit in a man's arms, and about as tall as half the average height of a man. The egg was as white as snow, but there were multiple golden patterns covering the entire egg. Ling Han was dumbstruck with shock. Even if the little girl went through a complete transformation and became a young beautiful fairy, he would be able to accept the reality after experiencing a slight shock. But a living human being actually transformed into an egg. What could this mean? He did not have any doubt that Hunyou was currently inside this huge egg, because there was no disturbance to the restriction he had set up. Obviously, no one had entered or left the area. Hunyou's origins were extremely strange in the first place, after all. She could increase her cultivation level by consuming large amounts of food, which was a very shocking thing. Thus, though the effects of the godly medicine were unbelievably powerful, it was not impossible for the little girl to refine it, and this was also why Ling Han had not been overly worried the day before. But a hen became a duck, and a little girl became an egg. This was extremely bizarre. Ling Han approached the egg. He began observing it, but could not find any clues from his observation. He stretched out his hand and placed it on the egg. He discovered something very surprising. The egg was emanating high heat, as if it was about to burn up at any moment. That was indeed very possible. He picked up the egg and placed it on the floor to avoid the whole courtyard turning into ashes if it did start burning up. Where did this little girl actually come from? Ling Han was getting more and more curious. In his last life, he had stood at the peak of martial arts and had ventured to a considerable number of ancient historical sites, as well as had a considerable understanding of the various races with special constitutions. Yet, he had never heard of any race that could increase their cultivation level simply through consuming food, and could even transform into an egg. He did not dare to break open the egg to check up on Hunyou either. Although he had never seen such a thing, but he could refer to birds and knew that it was necessary for chicks to break open their eggs on their own. If he cracked the egg open, then that would definitely be an impatient move and only cause harm to Hunyou. He had just been reborn not too long ago, yet he had actually encountered so many bizarre events. Thankfully, he had a healthy heart, or he would have already had a heart attack from a series of so many shocks. Forget it. From the looks of it, it's quite peaceful, so the little girl should be fine. Then, I'll just let her continue. Incubating. When he said the word incubating, he could not help but show a weird expression on his face. Every morning after waking up, he would go seek Mo Gao out for a discussion on the art of the sword. This had become his daily habit. Because he had been away the last few days, he could not join Mo Gao for a discussion. But now that he was back, he naturally went to Mo Gao's courtyard. The two of them discussed the art of the sword while simultaneously verifying each other's standpoints, so they both improved drastically. In less than 3 days, I should be able to break through. Tomorrow, I will be entering seclusion, Mo Gao announced suddenly. Ling Han was at first stunned. Then he raised his clasped hands in Mo Gao's direction and said, "My congratulations to you, Teacher Mo. This sword maniac was a genius in the first place." However, he had fixed his target too high, placing his aim directly on the sword heart and thus causing his cultivation to stagnate for these 10+ years. In other words, any other person needed only get 10 marks to advance 1 level. But Mo Gao wanted to get 1,000 marks and directly advance 100 levels. As a result, he was naturally stuck where he had begun. However, after his many discussions with Ling Han, the grand door of sword arts that had only opened a single sliver to Mo Gao was now completely wide open, and he had all of a sudden attained a drastic improvement. As the saying goes, good preparation is the key to success. Thus, he had attained the comprehension he needed to break through in this short period of time. Ling Han did not feel anything was strange about this. When compared with the difficulty of forming sword heart, breaking through to gushing spring tear was a piece of cake. This sword maniac had finally found his way, and at least before spiritual infant tier, he would not encounter any bottlenecks in his cultivation. He could completely depend on his comprehension of the concept of sword heart, and had boundless prospects ahead of him. Ling Han was happy for him as well. He had secretly decided that once this teacher of his had reached spiritual pedestal tier, he would teach him a cultivation technique. Since all the cultivation techniques in Rain Country were at most only level 5, there was no way to peek into the mysteries of Flower Blossom tier. Otherwise, there would have at least popped up 1 or 2 geniuses in the 8 great clans that managed to break through to Flower Blossom tier after so many years, right? He did not know what fateful encounter the Qi clan had come across that allowed them to possess a powerful warrior of Flower Blossom tier, which secured their place as ruler of this country. Could it be the power of the nation? Ling Han had never been an emperor before, so he was not very familiar with the concept, but when he recalled that in the 9 nations of the desolate north, only the imperial clan had a powerful warrior of Flower Blossom tier to oversee things, then it should be related to being the ruler of a nation. Before this, Ling Han only knew that stimulating the power of the nation could increase one's battle prowess, like Qi Yongyi. He was only the son of a king, and so could only stimulate the power of a single city, but his Son of Heaven Fist technique was still very powerful. If the ruler of a nation used the Son of Heaven Fist technique to stimulate the power of an entire nation, then that would definitely be far more powerful. But could the power of the nation also increase one's cultivation level, allowing one to break through to Flower Blossom tier, and complete the step of casting off one's mortal body? Ling Han shook his head. Whatever, he didn't need to worry about cultivation techniques anyways. After leaving Mo Gao's place, it was already about noon. Ling Han did not want to cook when it was only him, so he went out of the academy and visited a restaurant to have a meal. He had not been in the Imperial City for a very long time, thus he would pick a different restaurant every time he ate out to try out which restaurant had the best meals. However, it seemed that he was a natural magnet for trouble. He had just finished placing his order and was waiting to be served when he saw a company of 4 come upstairs. It was mealtime currently, and this restaurant was obviously very popular, because there was no empty seat in sight. Thus, the company of 4 stood at the head of the stairs, casting their eyes all over the place, seemingly looking for an empty table. A waiter approached them and seemed to explain something to them. Yet after a short while, he walked over to Ling Han and said, "Honorable customer, could you give up your table?" Ling Han frowned and asked, "Why do I have to give up my table?" Honorable customer, do you not know the 4 of them? That's young Master Kong and his friends. They are not to be trifled with. I am asking this for your own good." The waiter looked at Ling Han with a shocked expression, looking like he was very surprised that Ling Han did not know this young Master Kong. "No, and I don't intend to know." Ling Han shook his head. "Serve the dishes quickly. Perhaps after I have dined for about an hour, I'll leave, and there will be an empty spot by then." "About an hour?" The waiter gave a bitter smile. If he really had to wait for about an hour, then that young Master Kong would probably have their restaurant torn apart. However, first come first serve. That was the most basic rule. If the restaurant could not even guarantee this, then who would want to come here to dine in future? He could only force himself to speak with young Master Kong. After another while, that young Master Kong and his friends approached Ling Han. Poor fool. Take this 100 silver coins and get lost. Young Master Kong commanded, a disdainful expression on his face. A monetary note was tossed onto the table. It was indeed a monetary note worth 100 silver coins. Ling Han gave a faint smile. Since there was someone deliberately giving him money, then he would of course not refuse. He said, "Waiter, did you hear that? Someone is treating me to a meal, so why don't you quickly serve some fine wine and dishes?" Fuck! Young Master Kong was extremely furious. This brat accepted his money and was still not getting lost? He placed his right hand onto the table and threatened, "Poor fool. If you don't want to get beaten up, you'd better get lost quickly." In the Imperial City, in a public place, even a prodigal young master like him would not dare to openly threaten the life of someone else. Ling Han turned his head to look left, then turned to look right, and asked, "Where is this barking coming from?" "Wong, wong, wong. What an irritating noise." A poochie sound was heard. Someone could not hold back their laughter at this. The laugh was a crisp sound, having a captivating feeling that could not be described by mere words, and instantly caused quite a number of people to turn around to look at the source of the laugh. The one who had laughed was an extremely beautiful young woman, about 23 or 24 years old. Her black hair cascaded down her shoulders like a waterfall, and her features were clearly defined as if they were shaped by a knife. This woman had a very unique bearing. Because she was seated, there was no way to see how shapely her figure was. But when one saw how her breasts were big enough to block one's eyes from continuing to move down the rest of her body, one should know how impressive her figure should be. All of a sudden, everyone was stunned by her beauty. What was even stranger was that such an outstanding beauty had been sitting here for so long, yet they had only realized it now. But they quickly realized the reason why. There was a piece of light muslin on the table of this beauty. Most likely, when she came in, her face was veiled. It was only when she began to eat that she removed her veil, so she did not attract much attention. Moreover, this beauty was definitely not an ordinary person. There were 3 large, sturdy men dressed all in black seated together with her at the same table. They did not have any particular expression on their faces, but it was obvious they were her bodyguards, because only the beauty was holding chopsticks, while the other 3 were sitting very alertly. The reason why they had not been standing behind the beauty was obviously not to attract unnecessary attention. However, their cold expressions and uniform clothing was enough to attract attention. Young Master Kong was also staring at the beauty, and could not help reveal a perverted expression. He asked the beauty, "Beauty, what's your name?" The beauty did not answer, but one of the men in black waved a hand at young Master Kong, as if he was shooing away a fly. Young Master Kong had the feeling like he was about to go crazy. Just now, a young man actually dared to ignore him, and now another person was waving his hand at him to chase him away. What was going on here? Could it be that after a single night, the Imperial City was no longer the Imperial City he knew? "How dare you be so insolent towards young Master Kong?" One of the friends of young Master Kong stepped out and shouted loudly at that man in black. There was no change in expression on the man's face. He only took out a golden plaque from his robes, and once again made a shooing motion. "Hung, whatever plaque that is, it's useless. Our young Master Kong dash. Pa!" That scoundrel friend was just about to brag about young Master Kong, yet never thought that he would be suddenly given a heavy slap. He looked at young Master Kong in disbelief, because the one who had slapped him was precisely young Master Kong. "If you fucking want to die, don't drag me along with you." Young Master Kong cursed at him furiously, and then turned to the man in black. His expression had instantly become very respectful and said, "This master, please forgive this Kong Wen Hui for his blindness." Hiss! All the people in the restaurant were astonished. Had this young Master Kong been bewitched or something like that? He had first slapped his own lackey, and was now taking the initiative to apologize? There was only one possibility then. The other group had a far bigger background than the Kong clan, so even the young master of the Kong clan could only bow his head humbly in front of them. The man in black still did not speak, and only waved his hand a third time. This time, young Master Kong dared not disobey. He left with his tail between his legs, and did not even take back the monetary note worth 100 silver coins. He was already scared out of his wits. Everyone could not help but look at that plaque. What kind of identity did that plaque represent that even young Master Kong was scared off by it? "Ah, I remember now," one of the customers exclaimed in surprise, but he immediately used his hands to cover his mouth, a terrified expression appearing on his face. Hey, just tell me quietly. What does that plaque represent?" "That's right, tell us." The man who shouted just now looked over at them, but when he saw that there was no visible reaction from the three men in black, as if they could care less, he said bravely, "They are the palace guards, the Black Cloud Army." All of a sudden, the entire restaurant became completely silent. The words Black Cloud Army seemed to have power by themselves, causing everyone to tremble in fear. And that was exactly the truth of the matter. The Black Cloud Army were the imperial guards of the imperial family, and they were the most elite unit. All the members of this army were elite martial artists. More importantly, they had the power to kill without punishment. In the imperial city, even the spiritual pedestal tier elites of the 8 great clans could not simply murder anyone they disliked. As the saying goes, a country has its laws and a family its rules. However, the Black Cloud Army could do so as long as they thought that a person could possibly become a threat to the safety of the imperial family. Thus, even a person as arrogant as young Master Kong could only run away as fast as he could. Otherwise, if he was killed, he'd have died for nothing. Everyone else became even more curious. Who exactly was this outstandingly beautiful woman that she would have 3 members of the Black Cloud Army stay by her side to protect her? From her looks, she was alluring, voluptuous, and very mature, so she should not be an innocent maiden anymore. Thus, she should not be a princess or something of the sort. Could she be one of the imperial consorts? When they thought about this, everyone immediately cast their eyes elsewhere. This was the emperor's woman. If anyone dared to look at her for too long, who knows, they might have their eyes removed. Yet why had a woman of the Rain Emperor left the palace? Ling Han swept his eyes over the 3 members of the Black Cloud Army and that beautiful woman, and was slightly surprised. Those 3 members of the Black Cloud Army were only in Gushing Spring tier, yet the beautiful woman was actually in Spiritual Ocean tier. A woman in her early 20s was already in Spiritual Ocean tier? That was really too unbelievable. This woman should have used some kind of medicine to preserve her beauty, and her real age should be at least 27 or 28. Otherwise, she should not be a citizen of Rain Country, but must have come from some major sect outside of Rain Country. That would not be strange then. One by one, the customers all settled their bills and left. To be in the same room as 3 members of the Black Cloud Army that could kill without suffering any kind of punishment. Just thinking about it made their hair stand on ends and lose any appetite they might have had. Ling Han's dishes were also served. He began to eat without care. Sounds of music were suddenly heard, and soon footsteps could be heard coming up the stairs. Very soon, the owners of the footsteps had arrived on the 2nd floor. They were an old man and a young girl. The old man had a slightly stooped figure and had a goatee, while his hands held onto a huqin. The young girl was dressed in coarse clothing, but her poor attire was unable to hide her shapely figure. She wore no makeup, but her face was refreshingly beautiful and extremely gorgeous. In terms of beauty, she was only slightly inferior when compared to Lu Yutong and Li Sichuan. Xia. The old man found a spot and sat, then began to play his huqin, whereas the young girl began to sing along to the music. Her singing voice was sinuous and melodious, causing anyone who listened to be unknowingly captivated by her voice. Even the 3 members of the Black Cloud Army, who had not spoken or smiled at all, could not help but show moved expressions and captivated eyes when they heard the naturally beautiful singing voice of the young girl. Ling Han, meanwhile, gave a sigh. Looks like he would not be able to enjoy this meal in peace. He had sensed killing intent. The old man looked up, and when his eyes fell upon the beautiful woman, the music took a different note. The music that had been sinuous like springtime in the month of March and a young girl that had been declaring words of love to her beloved had become harsh in a single instant, as if announcing the marching of military troops on their way to attack their enemies, resounding with a predatory air. The young girl had also changed. The song she was singing changed, and she sang a song of inciting strength and attack. At the same time, she began to dance as if she was practicing sword techniques. And though there was no sword in her hands, she displayed the grandness of a skilled swordsman. The area she was moving in became wider and wider, and she got nearer and nearer to that beautiful woman. The song resounded, and like an ocean's wave, captured the hearts and minds of those who listened. The only unexpected factor was Ling Han. His divine sense was not only stronger than any normal element-gathering tier martial artist, he also possessed the martial heart of a heaven-tier elite, and was most able to protect his heart and mind. So the real intention was revealed now. The young girl had neared the beautiful woman in her dance when her right hand suddenly waved and a bright sword appeared in her hand, which swept towards the beautiful woman. With this one slash, she looked like a fairy descended from the heavens, too beautiful for words. I already expected it would be you people. It was at this moment that the beautiful woman suddenly slammed her hand onto the table. Pa! And a table made of high-quality rosewood was instantly turned into pieces. The broken pieces of wood shot towards the young girl as if they were arrows shot from a bow, and though the beautiful woman had made her move later, the broken pieces of wood reached the young girl first. Ding, ding, ding! The young girl waved her sword and parried away the pieces of wood. However, it was also at this moment that the 3 members of the Black Cloud army came back to themselves. They all wore expressions of shock, because they had reacted much too slowly. If they had been the targets of the young girl's assassination plot, then they would have died from their carelessness. How dare you! The 3 men shouted furiously in unison as they all drew their respective weapons and charged at the young girl. Who cares if you are an outstandingly beautiful woman? Anyone who dared to make a move against an imperial consort would have committed a crime of high treason and would have all their relatives executed with them as punishment. 3 smelly bugs! The young girl's eyes turned cold. Her sword swept forward in an arc, and instantly 3 flashes of sword chi shot out. What? The 3 members of the Black Cloud army gasped in shock. 3 flashes of sword chi meant that this young girl was already in the ranks of rulers. The young girl was obviously a high-level gushing spring tier elite, and the terrifying power of her sword chi was not something that could be withstood by these 3 men. As the sword chi danced unhindered, piu piu piu, a wound appeared on the chests of the 3 men, and blood gushed forth. They were killed in a single instant. The young girl gave a light whistle, and continued to attack the beautiful woman. Murder! Those few customers who had remained in the restaurant finally came back to reality, and they all shouted in shock as they all fled downstairs. Little sister. So you people are the ones who used the falling flower command to lure this big sister out? The beautiful woman giggled. She did not stand up, but simply used her bare hands to defend herself and solidly blocked the young girl's sharp blade. When one looked closely, there was a pale light wrapped around both her hands. Every time her hands clashed with the sword, the light would brighten and block any damage that could possibly be inflicted by the sharp blade. The young girl did not respond. She simply increased the power of her attacks, and every slash was swift and fierce. Little sister, which one is your master? The beautiful woman looked very calm. She was in spiritual ocean tier, and was completely dominant over the young girl who was only in gushing spring tier, so she naturally appeared to be completely at ease. Chong! The old man who had been playing the huqin by the side stopped playing his music. He pounced and also leaped towards the beautiful woman. He waved his right hand, and a few strings of the huqin flew forwards to coil around the beautiful woman. Ancient thousand silk threads? The beautiful woman narrowed her eyes before smiling softly, and said, You are not this big sister's type. Big sister does not like to be tied up by you. If you were a handsome man, then Big Sister would be a little interested. These 2 people were obviously assassins. There was no change in their expressions when faced with their opponents, flirting. On the other hand, their attacks were quick and forceful, and they moved in well-practiced coordination. However, they were both only in Gushing Spring tier. Even if they were in the 9th layer of Gushing Spring tier, how could they be a match against a spiritual ocean tier elite? The beautiful woman only slightly increased the effort she was putting into this battle, and it was enough to cause these two people to face danger on all sides. Never thought about it, right? I betrayed and left the falling flower court. Yet my cultivation level has broken through to spiritual ocean tier. She laughed lightly. Her figure moved lightly, but her attacks became faster and more powerful. If a spiritual ocean tier elite became serious, how could mere Gushing Spring tier martial artists stand against her? The two assassins were instantly in dire straits, and looked to be trapped in a very difficult situation. I only need one person to go back and report. The beautiful woman revealed a cold killing intent. Go and tell that bitch, Hua Wuyu, that when I break through to spiritual pedestal tier, that would be the day that bitch has to surrender her head. Her killing intent blazed, and her attacks were even more ruthless. The old man and the young girl exchanged a look before they each stretched out a hand to hold onto each other. Instantly, there was an indescribable power circulating, and there actually appeared an inconceivable increase to their battle prowess, which helped them withstand the beautiful woman's killing moves one after another. Ling Han was astounded as he thought, was this 2 hearts beat as 1? This was a secret technique that could force out 10 times the amount of potential 2 people had. However, when the technique's effects ended, these 2 people who had used the technique would experience a setback in their cultivation levels. This technique belonged to the last resort category of martial arts techniques. However, the 2 hearts beat as 1 technique had very strict requirements for its use. The 2 people who used this technique had to be siblings, but there was such a large gap between the ages of these 2 people, so how could it be possible that they were siblings? While he was still feeling surprised, the 2 assassins obviously knew they were no match for the beautiful woman. Only managing to withstand a few attacks from the beautiful woman, they suddenly leaped out the window, fleeing off into the distance. The beautiful woman chased after them too and stood by the window, watching the spot the 2 assassins had vanished at, but made no move to continue her pursuit. The people who had been walking on the streets had heard the window break, and they all turned to look up. However, what they saw was an extremely beautiful woman standing from the window. As a light breeze blew, her silken garments were tightly wrapped around her shapely figure, clearly outlining her voluptuous body, and the passers-by could not help but salivate at this sight. This was indeed an extremely captivating beauty. The beautiful woman turned back round and cast a look at Ling Han, and said, "Little brother, you are really quite brave not to flee." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I'm so scared that my legs have become weak. Even if I want to flee, I can't." Giggle! The beautiful woman covered her mouth and laughed. The beauty trembled in her humor, and had an indescribable allure to her. Big sister is fond of your type, having a sweet mouth for flattery and a good sense of humor. What a pity that big sister is already married. Her figure suddenly leaped out the window, completely ignoring the corpses of the 3 members of Black Cloud Army. The most vicious is a woman's heart. Ling Han shivered internally. Just now, that beautiful woman had actually borne killing intent towards him, but for some reason, gave up on her intention. Just having a simple meal and things could become so hair-raising. This really made him lost for words. Ling Han rose up from his seat and left. This had nothing to do with him. He did not have the free time to concern himself with unnecessary matters. This was an area directly under the control of the Emperor, and 3 members of the Black Cloud Army had died, so it was a very serious matter. In mere moments, the whole imperial city was completely on alert. One infantry troop after another was seen patrolling the streets, searching for the location of the 2 assassins. After Ling Han returned to the Huyang Academy and entered his courtyard, his brow immediately creased into a frown. Someone had touched his restriction and had entered his courtyard. Shwa! A bright light flashed, and a sword was pointing right at his chest. A beautiful young girl appeared. "Don't make any noise, or else I will kill you." This young girl actually happened to be one of the assassins at the restaurant. Ling Han's expression became strange. This was really too much of a coincidence, wasn't it? This young girl was actually hiding at his place. But when he thought about it, Huyang Academy was indeed the best place for them to avoid their pursuers. Moreover, this was the most secluded, desolate corner of Huyang Academy. So it wasn't really too much of a coincidence that this pair of assassins had found their way here. He smiled calmly and said, I do not like someone pointing their sword at me. Hang, even if you don't like it, you'll have to like it now, the young girl declared a little naively, not showing the slightest bit of sign that she was a cold-blooded assassin. Ling Han stretched out a finger, pressed down on the sword's blade, and said, You have just used 2 hearts beat as one technique. Do you even have a single % of your battle prowess left? His physical body had already surpassed the level of body of Dead Tree, and was nearing the level of body of Rock Cliff. Even if he was not circulating origin power to increase his defenses, there was no way the sharp blade of the sword was able to wound his finger. He gave a flick of his finger, and the sword immediately swept to another side. This is much better. The corners of his lips turned up into a smile. The young girl could not hold back an expression of surprise, and asked, How did you know we used 2 hearts beat as one technique? That isn't some kind of incredible secret technique. Ling Han shook his head. In his last life, he did not have any siblings. Thus, even when he had obtained this technique, he only took one look at it and tossed it aside right after. He only knew the use of this secret technique as well as its drawback, but could not recall its exact details. Hang, even if we only have a single % of our original battle prowess left, it would be more than enough to take care of a mere 6th layer of element-gathering tier martial artist like you, the young girl said, unconvinced, and once again raised her sword to point at him. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, If you misbehave, I'll smack your bottom. Scoundrel! A red blush immediately rose up on the pretty face of the young girl, and her sword suddenly shot towards Ling Han in an attack. If this young girl's battle prowess had not dropped, then Ling Han would really have not dared to receive her attack head-on. After all, the 7th layer of Gushing Spring Tier was much stronger than him. But there may not even be 1,000th of her initial battle prowess left, what more a single %. Additionally, he was a freak whose battle prowess allowed him to stand equal with the 1st layer of Gushing Spring Tier. In simpler terms, the result was that he was at an advantage in terms of battle prowess. Pung, pung, pung. A few punches from Ling Han, and the sword was successfully flung out of the young girl's hands. Ding! And the sword was firmly stabbed into the ground, swaying from side to side. Will you only behave after getting your bottom smacked? Ling Han deliberately put on a severe expression. The young girl was so scared that her face had gone pale. Why was she so unlucky? This was her first mission, and it had failed impressively. Moreover, she had only escaped the wolf's den, but had entered into the tiger's lair. Shoo! Another figure flew out. It was the old man, the other assassin. As his hands waved, the threads of the huqin danced, as if they were silk threads, winding towards Ling Han. Old man, though I have respect for the elderly, but if you flaunt your seniority in front of me, I will not be polite either, Ling Han declared as he used his fists to parry the old man's attacks. Due to his powerful defenses and sturdy physical body, those huqin threads that should have been able to cut through metals could do nothing against his bare fists. The young girl also advanced with her sword in hand. The two of them moved in well-practiced coordination, and when they combined forces, their collective battle prowess not only doubled, but increased by 2 to 3 times. However, their battle prowess had suffered a drastic setback, and along with the fact that their opponent was a monster like Ling Han, they were still suppressed to the extent that they couldn't even fight back even if they just joined forces. The two of them could not help but feel extremely astounded. Even if their battle prowess had dropped drastically, if they combined forces, their power should be more than enough to dominate over any 9th layer of element-gathering tier martial artist. Yet this young man in front of them was really monstrously strong. He actually managed to turn the tables on them to suppress them. If you misbehave, then you'll be thrashed. Ling Han's foot kicked out and hit directly on the young girl's bottom, kicking her some distance away before throwing a punch onto the old man's chest, also forcing him to fly off some distance away from him. But after he had thrown this punch, Ling Han's expression became a little strange. There was something off about that feeling. He walked towards the old man who was already lying down on the ground, now only able to moan in pain. Ling Han felt about the old man's face, and suddenly tore off a thin mask with a tear. The old man's appearance changed greatly in that single instant, and actually revealed an angry-looking beautiful young face that looked quite similar with the young girl's face. No wonder. Ling Han finally understood. Just now, he was still feeling curious about how there could be such a large age gap between this pair of brother and sister. Now it looks like the elder brother wasn't the elder brother at all, but an elder sister who had simply disguised herself as an old man. Lecher? The elder sister shouted in anger, a furious blush on her face, before actually fainting from her rage. Ling Han sighed. He had not deliberately attacked her breast. Who asked this girl to disguise himself as an old man? Sister! After the disguise was exposed, the young girl made no more attempts to gloss things over, and immediately called out. Unfortunately, the kick that Ling Han delivered just now was really very heavy. Her bottom felt like it was burning even now. She had just gotten up before falling down to sit on the ground again. How troublesome! Ling Han sighed again. Do you two not have some other place to hide that you must come here to add onto my troubles? The young girl put on an expression as if she had been wronged. If they had known that there was a perverted lecher living here, they wouldn't have come here even if they were beaten to death. Hey, cursing someone in your heart is not a good thing to do, Ling Han said. How did you know? The young girl asked in shock, an adorable expression on her face. With your kind of temperament, you want to be an assassin? Ling Han only felt that the master of these two sisters was really too much of a failure to actually train this kind of assassins. Their master should practically hit himself with a piece of tofu, thus committing suicide. What do you care? The young girl humphed and ignored him. Watch out, or I will smack your bottom, Ling Han threatened. You dare! The young girl was once again so scared by his threat that her face had turned pale. Usually, she had her elder sister to protect her, but now that her sister was unconscious, she suddenly felt at a loss. You two only know how to give me trouble. Ling Han shook his head. He stretched out a hand, grabbed the collar of the elder sister, and walked over to pick up the younger sister before entering his house. What do you want to do? The younger sister had turned pale from fear. Was this guy going to commit a crime of lust in broad daylight? What do you think? Ling Han asked, deliberately putting on a wicked expression. The younger sister was so scared her eyes rolled in the back of her head, and actually fainted too. I give up. They are like this, and they want to become assassins. Ling Han shook his head. At first, when he saw the well-coordinated movements of these two girls, and how well-practiced they were, he had thought they were experienced assassins. But in the end, they were mere rookies. He tossed the two girls into Hunyo's room. He thought for a while, then moved Hunyo's egg into his own room. Who knows when the little girl would hatch out of her egg? After a short while, the pair of sisters awoke, and when they discovered they were fully dressed and there was nothing off with their appearances, they both felt relieved. Sister, let's take advantage of that guy not being here and quickly flee, the younger sister said. How do we flee? The elder sister said with a bitter smile. After we used 2 hearts beat as 1, we forced ourselves into another battle. Can you even use origin power now? If we go out now and fall into the hands of those smelly men, I would rather die. But that guy is really bad, always saying that he's going to smack my bottom, the younger sister said, feeling very wronged. That person's eyes look very clear, so I don't think he's that kind of person. The elder sister shook her head. Sister, don't forget that he groped your breast just now. The younger sister pointed out this fact. Stupid girl, don't talk nonsense. I was punched by him, the elder sister quickly argued. What's the difference? The younger sister mumbled. Ling Han had just pushed open the door and entered, and could not stop his face from twitching. This pair of sisters were even more amateurish than he had thought. When they saw Ling Han come in, both sisters put on guarded expressions. Just now, they could somehow still have the ability to fight, but now they were really like fish upon a chopping block, completely at the mercy of others. Ling Han moved a stool closer to them, sat down and said, "Why don't you tell me your story?" Both girls shook their heads at the same time, and the younger sister even declared stubbornly, "Death is better than being insulted. Just kill us. All right, since you two are so determined to die, then I'll give you a hand." Ling Han nodded and stood. The two sisters looked like they were not afraid of death and exposed their necks to receive a killing blow, but their tightly gripped hands betrayed them. Who would not be afraid when facing death? Ling Han rubbed his chin and said, "You two are quite good-looking. To just kill the two of you seems to be too much of a waste. How can you be so untrustworthy?" The two sisters declared angrily, "Kill us quickly." Ling Han could not help being amused, and asked, "So what if I am untrustworthy?" "You won't get a good end," the younger sister said with a pale face. Ling Han laughed loudly and asked the elder sister, "Bringing along a silly little girl like this is a lot of pressure, isn't it? You even insulted me?" The younger sister only felt extremely wronged. This young man either insulted her or scared her. He was really too despicable. Moreover, he didn't look much older than herself, yet kept referring to her as a little girl, pretending to be so much more mature. "Tell me your names, or I will smack your bottoms," Ling Han threatened. "Hung, I won't tell," the younger sister declared stubbornly. "I am Lu Feng Heir, and she is my younger sister, Lu Ru Heir," the elder sister said. "Sister, why did you tell him? We would rather die than submit," the younger sister, Lu Ru Heir, declared with a pout. "What about the person you want to kill?" Ling Han asked. "Her name is Suku Xian. She used to be a member of our Falling Flower Court, but is now our enemy." This time, Lu Ru Heir snatched the chance to answer first. Since there was no possibility of rather die than submit anymore, then there was no way that an outspoken person like her could hide any secrets. "Why?" Ling Han asked. He truly felt that his curious nature was much too strong. This had nothing to do with him at all. Suku Xian used to be the top assassin of our Falling Flower Court, but she actually allied herself with an outsider, charged into our Falling Flower Court, and killed almost all the members of our Falling Flower Court. Although the two of us sisters are all that is left of the Falling Flower Court, we will definitely make this traitor repay with her life. Lu Ru Heir made an impassioned declaration, her head held high. "Pa!" Ling Han flicked her forehead, which caused the young girl to hold onto her head in pain as she looked at Ling Han with murderous eyes. "You tell me?" Ling Han turned to look at the elder sister. "We come from Fire Country, and Falling Flower Court is an organization of assassins. Since young, us two sisters were taken in by our grand elder as disciples. Suku Xian collaborated with the imperial family of Fire Country and practically massacred the entire Falling Flower Court. Elder Hua managed to save the two of us and flee, but her injuries were much too severe. She only managed to last for a few years, and died last year," Lu Feng Heir said. Her explanation was clear and methodical, unlike her younger sister's disorganized explanation. The latter didn't even care if her audience understood her or not. And the reason why Suku Xian had committed such crimes was only because she wanted to steal a treasure of the Falling Flower Court, a staying youth pill. After she got it, she made her way to Rain Country, and using some unknown methods, actually became an imperial consort of the Rain Emperor, gifted with the honorable name of Consort Yun. We used the token that she had left behind to lure her out, but never thought that after a mere 5 years, that woman actually broke through to spiritual ocean tier, making our plans fail at the final step. Ling Han was astounded. Just for the sake of a staying youth pill, she actually became hostile and cruel enough to destroy the sect that had nurtured her for years? But when he thought about it, there were indeed some women who placed as much importance on their beauty as on their very lives. For these women, they could sacrifice anything as long as they could preserve their beauty. But this Suku Xian really did have her ways to actually manage to clear her history of bloodshed and murder, and actually become an imperial consort of Rain Country. "You can rest here and wait for your wounds to recover. When you are recovered, you must immediately leave," "Do not drag me into this," he said. Lu Ru'er looked extremely surprised and asked, "Why are you helping us?" Ling Han laughed and said deliberately, "Of course, it's because the two of you are so beautiful, so you can pay me back by marrying me in future." "Hung, I will not accept you," Lu Ru'er immediately declared proudly. "Silly girl." Ling Han shook his head. After understanding the whole situation, he had naturally lost the interest in continuing the conversation. So he turned around and left the room. The reason why he was willing to help them was because he was displeased with Suku Xian. That woman actually bore killing intent towards him. Of course he would have to go against her. Although there were another 2 mouths to feed added like this, compared with Hu Nyo's colossal appetite, there was not much difference whether these 2 sisters were here or not. The amount of food consumed would not attract anyone's suspicion. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. Ling Han took medicine every day, and so his cultivation advanced very rapidly. However, all medicine had a poisonous component, so even though he had concocted a large amount of alchemical pills, he could only take 1 or 2 pills per day. Otherwise, the natural poison content in these medicines could accumulate in his body and the result would be unthinkable. The Lu sisters recovered very slowly. Using the 2 hearts beat as one technique to force out their potential was harmful to their foundation, and no medicine would be of any help to any wound to a person's foundation. Even if there was, the medicine would at least have to be earth grade and above. Ling Han was not that generous to get some earth grade pills for these 2 sisters. There was a slight change to the egg that Hu Nyo had transformed into. The original white color had turned red, and he could vaguely see a crimson light flickering within, as if the little girl was about to hatch out of the egg soon. Those who had ventured to the site of that ancient battleground also returned one by one. The godly medicine had fled, the spiritual tools had flown off, and they had already gotten whatever they should have gotten. Whatever they didn't get, they had no way to get hold of anyways, so what was the use of continuing to stay there? At night, the 3rd Imperial Prince earnestly invited Ling Han to join him at Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Ling Han had quite a good impression of this Imperial Prince, so he decided to give the latter some face and accept the invitation. The Cherishing Flower Pavilion was the most luxurious money-squandering establishment of the Imperial City. Anyone with any slightest bit of social status would choose to receive guests here, because there was not only food made from valuable ingredients and excellent wine here, but also female attendants who had gone through strict training. These women were all extremely beautiful, and came with various bearings. It could be said that their bearing and beauty completely enabled them to pass themselves off as any princess of the various great clans. This naturally satisfied the hearts of all men who sought novelty as they chased after these female attendants. However, there was too strict a requirement to enter into this Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Even clansmen of minor clans had no right to enter into this place. The establishment would not accept their money to lower the entry requirement. But the more exclusive it was, the more popular the Cherishing Flower Pavilion was. One could not help but sigh at how well the owner of this establishment could grasp human psychology. The 3rd Imperial Prince did not only invite Ling Han. He also invited a lot of other young elites. He had reserved a courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion for his gathering, proving how very liberal he was with money. Merely the expenses for this one night would be enough for an ordinary family to live their entire lives in comfort. Ling Han strolled and arrived at the entrance of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. There were 2 exquisitely beautiful servant girls standing at the entrance to receive customers. They were tall and slender, graceful, and were very high grade in terms of appearance. Big brother Ling?" A voice filled with surprise suddenly called out from behind him. Ling Han turned around and saw a young man and woman standing side by side. He could not help but show a smile and said, "Li Hao Shui. It really is you." Li Hao and Zhu Shui both smiled and quickly approached him. "Hee. Should I be congratulating you for finally winning the maiden's heart?" Ling Han raised his clasped hands in Li Hao's direction, causing this guy to instantly show an expression of embarrassment. But there was no way to hide his joy either.